Let's get started. Hello and welcome everyone to the October 17th meeting of the Amherst Planning Board. Apologies for starting a few minutes late tonight. We're going to move over item 1 on the minutes and defer that to another night and go directly to the public hearing. In accordance with the provisions of sections 5 and 11 of Chapter 40A, these public hearings have been duly advertised, and notice thereof has been posted and mailed to the Mass Department of Housing and Community Development, the Pioneer Valley Planning Commission, and abutting towns. These hearings are being held for the purpose of providing an opportunity for interested citizens to be heard regarding these proposed amendments to the Amherst zoning bylaw/map. These amendments will be on the town meeting warrant for the fall special town meeting. 80613, single-family dwelling. This was continued from October 3rd to amend section 3.320 of the zoning bylaw to create 2 separate categories of single-family dwelling and to regulate single-family dwellings from being rented to groups of unrelated persons under different permitting requirements as a commercial enterprise. So we'll hear from the zoning subcommittee on this. Mr. Croner.
Okay, so first be sure that we're all looking at the same document. It should be 1017, single-family dwellings. About that. So again, the reason for this amendment and for all these amendments is that we're trying to see what we can do to address some of the excesses of the exploitation that is taking place in rental units in established neighborhoods, and so we're looking at all of the residential categories and seeing how we can maybe change them so that we're having a little bit better oversight over them. In the case of single-family dwellings, this is an especially difficult one because single-family use is the building block of a town, a city, of anything. So it's and of private property for an individual or family. So it's very difficult to make changes that don't unfairly restrict the established rights that we take for granted to do with our homes as we think fit. So it's difficult to do this. At the same time, we want to make sure that we're not allowing things to happen that we don't want to happen, that nobody wants to have happen, or almost nobody. So with that in mind, what is being proposed? There's a long preamble in red there. This was language that was suggested by town council to establish the reason for these amendments, for all the amendments, for the single-family amendment, the two-family amendment, and converted dwellings. It states that there is a situation that things are happening, and for that reason, we want to make these changes. So the reason for the preamble is to provide a defense, provide justification for what may be legal challenges in the future if these are passed. So the proposal for single-family dwellings is to, where there is one use category now, to make it 2 use categories. Essentially one which is owner-occupied and one which is not owner-occupied, and then to regulate them differently, to permit them differently, to make no changes to an owner-occupied dwelling. That's allowed by right in the residential districts. You can do what you want. If it's not owner-occupied, we're proposing that a special permit be required. if it's going to be rented to something other than the households that are defined in our bylaw as something that is not what is perceived to be the problem. That is the only the special permit is required if the rental is going to be to a group of 4 unrelated or more people. 4, but we know what the problem is. I guess that's essentially what's happening. There's additional red language that is also proposed by Town Council to further bolster what we're trying to accomplish here. What we sort of agreed on is that conditions 3 and 4, the proposed new conditions 3 and 4 are not necessary, but the other ones, 1, 2, and 5, should become part of the zoning bylaw to establish what we want when a application for a Class 2 single-family dwelling is proposed. That is, names and contact information of responsible parties, management plan, and then a expiration of the permit when the property changes hands. The zoning subcommittee, we talked about this at many meetings, and we are not in agreement about what should be done with single-family dwellings. In fact, we split 2 to 2 about recommending this, and I'll ask my colleagues to discuss why. Essentially, there's a tension between we want to do something and we don't want to do too much. And so, we'll be looking for guidance from the public, your input about which way we should go. So I guess I'll take questions if there are any, and maybe you can ask someone else to chip in.
Let's hear from a dissenting member of the zoning subcommittee.
So I was one of the 2 that voted against. So I think the intent is right, but really my primary concern is creating a nation of scofflaws, because renting your own house or renting a single-family house is such a common occurrence, and most cases a very benign occurrence. So we're essentially penalizing those who act in the right way and do the right thing for really the very few single-family houses that are the nuisance houses. So it's I fully support the next one, which is the duplexes, which has similar language, but I just am very concerned about the enormous amount of restrictions for most of the people that behave well in terms of renting out single-family houses.
Thank you, Mr. Schreiber. Other comments from the zoning subcommittee?
And I think, the space between us is very small. We agree with them, and I think they agree with us. But where exactly do you draw a line? It's a difficult thing to do. So.
Comments from the, I'll just speak to the format of this. After we've heard from in this case, the zoning subcommittee who's proposing this amendment, I'll take comments and questions from the remaining board members who are not members of the zoning subcommittee, and then I'll open it to brief comment from the members of the public. It's all going to be brief comment tonight because we have a very, very tight schedule. So are there any comments from the rest of the board members? Yes, Mr. O'Keefe.
I have a question and some comments. The question is a simple one, I hope. Is the red whereas language intended to go into the zoning bylaw, or is that just introductory material that presents it to town meeting?
Yeah, it's introductory material.
Okay, good, thank you. So in terms of comments, I'm having a very hard time supporting this also for many of the reasons that Stephen mentioned, and I fully recognize tension that Mr. Crowner described between doing nothing and doing too much. But I do think that this comes down on the side of too much. We live in a college town, and one of the fundamental realities of living in a college town is rental housing for students. That's always been the case, and it probably always will be the case. And I see this as potentially having a profound impact on the residential rental housing market, maybe in ways that we cannot even foresee. To say nothing of probably imposing a very significant increase in the number of special permit applications that we'd be seeing also. We'd be imposing on the ZBA, because they'd be the ones hearing them. I mean, renting to a group of unrelated people is a very common thing to do in this town and in surrounding towns. So I understand the desire to regulate that in some way, but I think that a special permit is a pretty high hurdle to jump over for that particular use. And I also am cognizant of the fact that we are working toward a system of rental permitting as a permit that would be required to be obtained to rent a house at all. You know, we don't have that in place now, but that's definitely the direction that we're going in. And I do very much support that. I can't wait for us to have that system in place. But I think that level of permitting is much more appropriate than having a land use permit for essentially a commercial rental transaction. And so I'm inclined toward having us build a robust and workable rental permitting system, and letting that try to address some of the problems that are out there.
Thank you, Mr. O'Keefe. Ms. Ford.
So I just want to piggyback a little bit on what Jonathan is saying, and my question has to do with what exactly would be the conditions of a special permit, or what would be the process of a special permit in this particular case. It feels like a completely different animal, and has that been discussed, or is there anything that needs to be brought to light about that, or that has been established?
Mr. Tucker.
The process would be identical. A special permit is a special permit. You notify abutters, you schedule and hold a public hearing. There is a set standard of submittal materials, including a management plan and others that are in the rules and regulations of whoever the permit granting body is. Both the Planning Board and the Zoning Board of Appeals have those rules and regulations. And then the board looks at the specific circumstances of the application in front of them. There has been discussion both among yourselves and among members of the ZBA about how to respond over time to different kinds of uses. For instance, we were talking earlier in the zoning subcommittee, and the ZBA's liaison was talking about the kinds of conditions they have learned to consistently apply to restaurants or to other uses, and that would apply here. Doubtless there would be a request or a requirement to submit the lease. There would probably be a requirement to identify who the contact person was, the responsible person on the property, and if this is adopted, that would be required under this as well. Those conditions which are specific to the use in front of them, in this case a rental residential use, the board would deal with. Has there yet been a full set of special conditions or circumstances vetted for that? No. Would they be developed? Yes, they would.
Thank you, Mr. Tucker. Okay, I'm going to provide a little bit of information about some other things that are going on, sort of building on both of these, specifically on Mr. O'Keefe's comments that the town is developing a rental registration bylaw. There's been a lot of action on that in the last couple of weeks. On October 4th, myself and Sandy Anderson both attended a meeting. What's that? And Rob was there too. My apologies, Rob. It was of the Safe and Healthy Neighborhoods Committee status meeting led by Town Manager John Musanti. The purpose of the Safe and Healthy Neighborhoods Working Group is to specifically to review rental regulations. There are a number of details which I just want to bring forward on that. The proposal, as outlined, a potential bylaw would contain not only a requirement that the property to be rented be registered, each rental property be registered. It requires an actual permit before you can do it. There would be a pre-inspection, pre-rental inspection, a determination of whether parking was adequate, an exterior property inspection to ensure the outside of the property was being kept up, provisions for the response to be made when a rental property causes problems, penalties accompanied with that, along with a reassessment of the for unrelated bylaw as it now stands. Those are all within the scope of the charge to be discussed. The committee will consist of either 11 or 12 members, depending on which paper you look at. And it'll include Dave Zomek, the Director of Conservation Development, one landlord rental property owner and one rental property manager, a residential homeowner, an off-campus student tenant, a representative of the UMass administration, a representative of the select board, representative of the planning board, the building commissioner, health director, planning director, police chief, and actually the fire department is involved as well. Let's see. This was also discussed at the select board meeting 2 nights ago, where John Musanti also reported, and the police chief and the fire chief both came and spoke to the relations between the UMass and the town, about holding joint patrols and other pieces of the enforcement side of things. And it was mentioned that UMass has recently appointed a new police chief, and the town is going to be trying to work with him to coordinate better enforcement of the current problems with hooliganism. So that's my report of
English soccer fans.
yes. So I just want to put in context what's happening behind the scenes, and that in my mind that does, as Mr. O'Keefe says, address a number of the concerns that are behind the idea of having a special permit for the rental of single-family houses. So, any further comments from the board? We'll hear Mr. Carson.
I was just going to say that with the special permit, though, the abutters would be notified, and that, to me, seems like a key ingredient, that neighbors would have some involvement then, at least in knowing where the parking might be and the other issues.
Thank you, Mr. Carson. Yes, Ms. Anderson.
And that isn't, the rental registration program isn't complete yet? I will have to share, thank you. The rental registration program isn't complete yet, and perhaps something to that effect could be worked into that. So to meet that, you know, so that abutters could be notified that property next door is turning into a rental property or something. And so it's, because it's still being formulated, it's not a done deal yet.
Thank you, Ms. Anderson. Okay. Why don't we take some public comment? Ms. Adams? And I do ask everyone, including planning board members and staff, to be brief tonight, because we have 6 public hearings to get through. 7 public hearings.
Want me to be a timekeeper? No.
Maureen Adams, Precinct 10. Although I'm not a bird catcher, I do believe that a bird in the hand is more dependable than one in the bush. And I have great confidence in the working group that is planning the rental permit, but we don't have it yet, and there's going to be a great deal of discussion and negotiation before that happens. So I urgently want the zoning to be right. And to solve the problem that we have right now, I'm hearing from more and more neighborhoods, as some of us get in the paper, we get phone calls about people who are sharing the same difficulty that we are across town of single houses being bought by investors, and whether or not the usage is legal or illegal, whether there are 4 or more students, the problems in those houses are profound for the neighbors. We need to know for certain that that whether it is a commercial enterprise that has bought a house, or whether I buy the house next door and decide to rent it out, it seems to me that in a college town, we have a particular kind of difficulty with young people, the taste of freedom, and the absence of supervision. And so it seems to me that it's extremely important that we have the bar set at a clear management plan. And it seems to me that it's the least that we can ask of people who are renting out their houses in a college town to come before a group, explain how the house is going to be run, and what their management plan is. Certainly this bylaw says that that permit will be in hand until ownership changes. It's not as if, according to this bylaw, that it will have to be revised each time we get a new group of tenants. So we're simply asking a family or an owner or a commercial enterprise, without discrimination to who the investor is, that they come before the public with a management plan, because in my view, rental to others is a privilege, not a right, commercial issues notwithstanding. And given the impact on neighbors of houses that are out of control, we have to ask of this group that you give us the zoning tools we need. If it turns out in the future that the rental permit is perfection and gives us everything we want, we can always backfill, we can always step back and remove parameters. But at the moment, we have an urgent situation, and I really don't want us to lose momentum. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Adams. Mr. O'Connor?
Vincent O'Connor, 175 Summer Street, number 12. And while I agree with the previous speaker about the nature of the problem, I can say categorically that this will not address the problem. The zoning bylaw proposed for your approval or your recommendation will only affect new construction. It's just like the zoning bylaw saying you have to have a defined area for parking rather than a general bylaw that says you can't park on the lawn. This has the same infirmity. It will only affect single-family homes prospectively, which means single-family homes built in the future for which there is and quite frankly, no one is going to build a single-family home for rental purposes. People may buy them, but they're not going to build them for single-family. Excuse me, sir, I'm speaking if you, I'm sure.
Mr. O'Connor, he didn't interrupt you. You may continue.
But yeah. He has his hand in the air ever since I started speaking. So
I've seen you do the same thing,
I would
Mr.
just
O'Connor.
appreciate it if that didn't happen. So my recommendation is that this proposed article will not solve any of the existing problems. It won't affect any of the existing rented single-family homes. It won't affect any single-family home that currently exists that might be rented in the future. It will only affect single-family homes that might be constructed in the future for rental purposes.
Yes, do you have anything new to add to that? You're repeating yourself.
I would hope that you would not waste the town meeting's time by proposing this article, and that the planning board would send back to committee and say what really needs to happen is we need to have a permitting system for rental activities, whereupon we could gather in all of the single-family rental units, not just the ones that might be built in the future for rental purposes.
Thank you very much, Mr. O'Connor. Mr. Schreiber?
I'm sorry to interrupt the flow of thought, but just for clarification, this would apply to you know, if this passes, this would apply to any currently owner-occupied house that is in the future rented. It doesn't have to do with new construction or not. It simply has to do with a change of use from owner occupation to rental.
That's correct.
I disagree with that.
It's not an arguable.
Further comment from the public? Further comment from the board? Any proposed changes to this article? Yes, Mr. Crowner.
So, a big reason that this was brought forward is single-family homes being rented currently has no oversight. It can just happen, and no one knows about it. So the point of this is to bring it before, as was said, to bring it before a board so that somebody can see something happening. Maybe special permit is not the right tool. Maybe site plan review is the right tool. But the point is to bring before someone so that we can have a discussion about the conditions.
Excuse me, Mr. O'Connor, if you continue to make noise back there, I'm going to ask you to leave. Thank you. You may continue, Mr.
I think
O'Connor.
I'm done. Yeah. I'm done.
Further comment from the board? Okay. Hearing no further comment, I'll entertain a motion to either close or continue the public hearing. Mr. O'Keefe,
I move to close the public hearing.
Second.
moved and seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor of closing the public hearing? That passes unanimously. Thank you. The board will now deliberate on the proposed amendment. Is there anyone who has anything more to add on this before we come to a vote? Mr. Tucker?
I would just reinforce both what Mr. Schreiber said and what Mr. Crowner said, that grandfathering applies to the use and not to construction. It also applies, or that is to say, it does not apply to a change in use. Nothing is grandfathered or protected if the use changes from one thing to another, then the zoning applies. Similarly, illegal uses that were not previously operating according to the zoning law as it exists, would be subject to this. I'm not sure in this case that would have a great deal of effect. I was going to say so, but Mr. Crowner already did. If one of the principal purposes of this is to make sure that people understand that a change is occurring, that neighbors are notified and have an opportunity to speak to it, and that there's an opportunity for a town land use body to attach conditions to the conduct of a use, then site plan review would work as well. What it would not do is allow you to say no to the use. It would make it a by right use with a review of the site and the management of the use. That is an option to consider.
Ms. Ford?
So I need to just ask again, how is this enforced? I own a house, I'm gonna rent it to somebody, and I don't let I just go ahead and do it. Is it my neighbor gonna call the building commissioner, call the police department? What happens here?
Mr. Tucker?
The enforcement of this would work in the way in which the enforcement of all zoning works. Either in response to complaint by someone, the tenant is not happy and complains to the Board of Health, and the Board of Health says, wait a minute, we don't have a record of this unit. Do you guys, speaking to the building commissioner, have a record of this unit? And the building commissioner says no, and they need a permit in order to do that use. That's one way. Or they notice it themselves for some reason. Suddenly there are more cars there than there were before, and one of the code folks notices that going by. It is not what the rental, as has been said, what the rental regulations would do, which is to seek to pull in and register and then regulate and require revocable permits for rental uses. This is zoning. That's how it works.
Thank you, Mr. Tucker. Ms. Ford, did that answer your question?
Thank you.
Mr. O'Keefe?
So I just wanted to add that, that I'm sympathetic to the notion that Mr. Carson raised earlier about notification to neighbors. So regardless of what happens to this, I would encourage our representative on the Safe and Healthy Neighborhoods Working Group, which I believe is Ms. Anderson, to convey that to them as a, something that we discussed, and something that I see nodding heads. So I think there's support for that. Hopefully that can make its way into the regulations.
I have a question for the zoning subcommittee. Was there any discussion of whether, if there was any economic impact of this proposed zoning change at all? In the sense of property values. In other words, could this reduce the value of a single-family home by making people less inclined to purchase them? Mr. Tucker?
There was discussion not of that as a direct impact, but of those impacts. Actually, the effect of having a rental property in Amherst, I don't know what the effect is in other communities, is that it increases the monetary value, often the assessed value of some of the properties in the vicinity. It may well decrease the value of the homes as places where people want to live, and that's a different question. But the assessor has indicated, and Ms. Kruger is welcome to she's shaking her head, so she's welcome to say otherwise, that you can sell a house for a great deal more to someone who wants to use it as a rental than you can to a homeowner, and that tends to increase since people are using comparables, that tends to increase the assessed values in the vicinity.
Thank you, Mr. Tucker. Ms. Kruger?
I just, this came up at a prior meeting, not our last one, but a couple of times ago, and I happened to run into the principal assessor, David Burgess, soon after, and I asked him that question because it was my understanding that it didn't change the assessed value or raise it, and he would not agree with your position. I don't know if you've checked it out with him lately, but it does not change the comps. So we may be getting into waters that we don't really know a lot about, and we didn't really talk about the economics. So I think we're really entering into speculation right now.
I was curious if there had been any discussion about it, and that's all.
I think we can say with some confidence that it affects the quality of life and people's value of the house in that way.
I agree.
Thank you. I think that, yeah, that. I can definitely see both sides of this. In general, I'm in favor of allowing town meeting to decide these things. So, and I think that the zoning subcommittee has done extensive work and received extensive public comment in crafting this particular regulation. Ms. Kruger?
Well, I'll just join in since I was one of the two no votes at the subcommittee, and I had a lot of chances to speak about this from my perspective in the zoning subcommittee. But I don't support the regulation of single-family homes to this degree as represented in this bylaw, especially at this time when we're on the brink of a whole other set of regulations, as Mr. O'Keefe mentioned, which I think or hope will be adequate to take care of most of the outstanding problems. And I don't want to live in a town that has this degree of regulation over single-family homes. And I think we're grasping at some straws because we recognize how severe the problem is, but I don't think these are the best solutions.
We have 8 members here tonight. Should we choose to vote on this, it would be a vote for or against recommending this article to town meeting. Our other alternatives here are to recommend that it not be brought to town meeting, or to recommend that it be referred back to the zoning subcommittee for further work. Am I correct on that?
We could recommend an amended version of the article.
Or recommend an amended version? So the only proposed amendment that I've heard is with respect to the special permit condition, changing it to site plan review. Ms. Kruger?
Mr. Crowner, didn't you make a recommendation to eliminate number 3 and 4?
Yep.
He
Oh.
mentioned that in the presentation.
So that would be a recommendation from the zoning subcommittee were it to move forward.
Let's see. Mr. O'Keefe?
So I guess my thought on, your proposed course of action, as you noted, Mr. Weber, a great deal of discussion and thought has gone into this already, and I do feel that ultimately it's town meeting's decision to make. So I guess I would not support trying to take it off the warrant and not bring it to town meeting. I think that we owe it to town meeting to let them make a decision on it. So I guess my inclination is for us to vote on our recommendation and send that to town meeting and make the decision.
Do we have a motion? Mr. Crowner?
I move to recommend the article as presented.
I will second.
And that's as amended by deleting sections 3 and 4.
Yes.
What about the SPR part?
If that fails, I'll make that motion.
Okay, okay.
Any further discussion? All right, all in favor? That's 4 in favor, all opposed? 4 opposed. And none abstaining. The motion fails. Mr. Crowner?
I move to recommend the article with a special permit in Class 2 replaced by site plan review. And I think that would also, in condition 5, would also have to be changed to reflect.
Yeah, a number of language changes, that's okay. You can do that.
Thank you, Mr. Crowner. Do we have a second? I'm sorry, Mr. Crowner, your motion's not seconded. So the determination of the planning board on this article is that it's 50-50. Someone remind me what the result of that is as far as this being put on the warrant.
Oh, it's on the warrant.
It's on the warrant,
Yeah.
so.
So it's
the-
just our recommendation.
So the planning board is split on this, and that will be reflected in the report to the select board and town meeting.
Okay.
Thank you, everyone. We'll move directly to the next public hearing.
May I just clarify that what you are split on and what you voted on was the motion as presented, with 3 and 4 missing and everything else intact?
Correct.
Okay.
In accordance with the provisions of Section 5 and 11 of Chapter 40A, this public hearing has been duly advertised, and notice thereof has been posted and mailed to the Mass Department of Housing and Community Development, Pioneer Valley Planning Commission, and abutting towns. This hearing is being held for the purpose of providing an opportunity for interested citizens to be heard regarding proposed amendments to the Amherst zoning bylaw. This amendment will be on the warrant for the fall special town meeting. A0313, two-family dwellings. This was originally opened on September 9th, 2012, and it was continued to October 3rd, 2012, 8 o'clock. And it's now being held tonight. This is A0313, two-family dwellings, to amend Section 3.321 and Article 12 definitions of the zoning bylaw to create 2 use categories for duplexes on the basis of owner occupancy, and to amend existing definitions and add new definitions pertaining to residential uses. Again, we'll hear a report from the zoning subcommittee.
Okay, so just like single-family dwellings, this is an attempt to regulate owner-occupied two-family dwellings differently from non-owner-occupied two-family dwellings by making them two use categories. It also, first of all, it describes what we understand to be a duplex to be. That is a two-family building that appears to be a single-family building or a single-family building in the context of its neighborhood. It goes on to add language that defines what how the building is arranged. That is, it's side by side or one on top of another in a single structure. And then it breaks it into two use categories. An owner-occupied duplex, that is one of the units is, the building is owned by a single entity and one of the units is occupied by the owner. That would be no change to current regulation, and that's allowed by site plan review in RVC and RG, special permit in the outlying neighborhoods. Also site plan review in the neighborhood business district. For non-owner occupied duplex, that is, the owner does not occupy either dwelling, we would propose that use require a special permit in all the residential districts and the neighborhood business district. It would allow the special permit granting authority to, it would require the special permit granting authority to require the services of a qualified professional property management company or something similar, including a on-site resident manager. And then it would add the other conditions that town council has recommended. Again, we're suggesting 1, 2, and 5, not 3 and 4. And finally, the second part of the article would add it or change the definition of duplex, just to clarify, to make it coincide with the description in the use category, use chart.
Thank you, Mr. Connor. Mr. Tucker?
I'd like to add, because this responds to an article that you've already reviewed, converted dwelling, that between the two of those, what you are in essence doing is saying that there's a difference between 2 units in a duplex and 2 units in a converted dwelling. And the difference is that a duplex is substantially created out of new construction. It's either a brand new building, it's a single family with a brand new addition to it, or it's a larger single family that's partially divided and has been substantially added onto. A converted dwelling, by contrast, is largely the creation of new units in an existing structure. It may involve the renovation and reconstruction of that structure, but it's principally that in that new structure with no more than 20% of the total habitable area being the result of new footprint or demolition and reconstruction. So the distinction is duplexes can have sort of a more marked change in their surroundings, whereas converted dwellings, hue to their original purpose. They were first created in post-World War II era as a way of trying to protect large, old single-family houses that were being cut up willy-nilly and redeveloped as multifamily units. The intent is to keep that original fabric largely unchanged or appropriately changed. So that's a distinction to remember when you're looking at this specific amendment, because it's going to come up again on the 7th when you're looking at the petition article, that there is a different way of approaching what a duplex is. So anyway.
Can you remind us, Mr. Tucker, at our last meeting we did discuss converted dwellings, and as I recall, there was some inconsistency between our decision on the converted dwellings and this. Was there, they would be treated differently? Am I remembering that wrong? Ms. Brestrup?
I think that had to do with the fact that a converted dwelling, even if it's owner-occupied, would still require a special permit. That was the main discrepancy.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Brestrup. Further comments from the zoning subcommittee?
So this was we recommended this by a 4-0 vote, so we agreed on this one.
Thank you, Mr. Connor. Questions or comments from the board? Ms. Anderson?
I have a question on what we're looking at on the back page under standards and conditions, the second paragraph. It begins, the special permit granting authority shall require the ongoing services of a qualified professional property management company, comma, the presence of an on-site resident manager or similar provision. Are these all either or? It isn't clear to me. It looks like that it's requiring the ongoing services of a qualified professional management company and the presence of an on-site manager or similar provision. So I just wanted to, maybe I'm reading,
It's all intended to be or.
It reads as or to me. so-
it reads as or to you?
The
Okay.
final word qualifies everything else as an
All
or.
right.
Happy to put an or before the presence of. If
That would make me happy.
clarifying.
It's like when I always get confused at restaurants where they have.
How many side dishes?
How many sides do you get, the vegetable or the potato? Thank
No,
you.
no substitutions.
Or,
Yeah, right.
thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Anderson. Anyone else on the board? Comments from the public? Mr. O'Connor? Very briefly.
Vincent O'Connor, 175 Summer Street. My comment about this article is that for the almost 40 years I've lived in town, this section, until within the last year or two, was used to, as a process to permit the construction of new residential units, and primarily affordable housing, such as in Tamarack Lane, Pally Village, by Habitat for Humanity, and other such activities, Jenks Street, and so forth, both by housing authorities, private entities like the and I think what's happened since this section was added to a few years ago is that it's become an alternative to the converted dwelling section in a not very good direction, because the converted dwelling section has a lot of conditions, and quite frankly, even with the additions here, the conditions under this section are not as extensive or as protective of the neighbors, of whatever property would be converted under this section. So I really would urge the board not to continue the use of this section and expand the use of this section as the basis for allowing converted dwellings. I think that we've had one very prominent instance that's going to really sort of literally, when the rubber meets the road on Taylor Street this December 1st, we're going to have some interesting problems with regard to parking. And I just think that the conversion of a single-family home to more than one unit ought to be under section 3.3241, and the construction of a duplex ought to be under this section, and we ought not to create two sections to accomplish the same purpose, one of which is manifestly less onerous than the other, less controlled, and more attractive, and therefore more likely to be used in a way that I think will result in not good things for the neighbors. So I would just urge the board to reconsider their interest in this and to look at the proposal, the petition proposal, as an alternative.
Thank you very much, Mr. O'Connor. Anyone else? Ms. Puffer?
Barbara Puffer, 85 Montague Road, Precinct 1. The heart of the matter for me, and I will be very brief, whether you're talking about single-family homes or converted dwellings, boils down to what happens in my neighborhood on Montague Road, where we have both types of dwellings. I understand the intent of all neighbors, including myself, that rental units anywhere have proper parking, nice exteriors where the owners have not let them go, where safety and health regulations are taken care of to a better extent than may currently be the case. However, and this is something that, you know, I would just like to make a tape and play it at every meeting, whether I come or not. Because I live on Montague Road during the party season, the bone of contention is not the parking of the cars. Montague Road, we have very nicely parked cars. Our exteriors are very decent. No garbage all over the place, no animals all over the place. What we have on particularly weekend nights is starting at 10 or 11 o'clock until 3 o'clock in the morning. We have nuisance houses. It does not matter if we're giving out, if the town police are giving out $300 fines like candy. I don't know who's paying them or if they are being paid. It does not seem to me that these regulations are going to assure me better sleep in my place on Montague Road. And that's what I am concerned about. I would like a collaboration between all of the related authorities and the authorities of the universities in town, so that when young people, what's the point of a college education? I mean, there's such a thing as civic education too, that when behavior is over the top, when it's assault and battery of a police officer, when it is behavior towards people on the sidewalk with obscenity and peeing behind my garage, et cetera, et cetera. I would really like there to be an enforcement to say, I am sorry, in this town, education is not about that. You can go home. You are suspended. Your parents are it's going to cost them $10,000 every weekend. I would like rules and regulations that probably do not come from this body, because I don't see in these things that are going to be taken care of by, you know, these regulations, I don't see how I am going to sleep between 10 and 3 on Montague Road. And please give me some answers here.
Thank you, Ms. Puffer. I can actually speak to your concerns and say that the town is doing exactly that. The safe and healthy neighborhoods is exactly what you just described. A group of the, what do you call them? All the invested parties, UMass, the property owners, the tenants, all the different departments of the town, including the Department of Public Safety, the Fire Department, the Department of Public Health, the Planning Department, Conservation Department, all working together to craft a set of rental permitting and inspection requirements and enforcement that deal with exactly what you're talking about. I also heard from the police chief at the last select board meeting, all who were there did, Mr. Carson was there as well, that the UMass and the town of Amherst are working on joint patrols currently, and that the new police chief has made it a priority of his to work with the town in enforcing the nuisance house regulations specifically. So thank you for your comment. I would like to ask, though, that further comments, we try to address this particular, any changes to this particular article. Ms. Adams?
Maureen Adams, Precinct 10, comment and a question. The comment is, I really want to appreciate the work that the zoning subcommittee did with the public in a number of hearings to bring this into a warrant that I think many of us can agree with. We're very pleased to see a special permit as the condition, the approval granting body for the two-family non-owner occupied. And we're very glad to see what is for us a minimum statement, a kind of minimum condition. I've been arguing for the single homes as well, that there at least be some kind of management plan that is agreed to as the condition for the non-owner occupied duplex. My question is this. Is it possible, I agree with one of the earlier speakers who said this business of duplex as distinct from conversion can be very confusing to all of us, and we know there are cases in which the ambiguity has permitted things we didn't want to have happen. So is there some way to stipulate definitions early on in the zoning language so that a duplex is substantially new, whatever percentage the board thinks is appropriate, and that the conversion is a conversion of something old, again, the proportion being clear. And that would, I think, solve some of the problems that an earlier speaker referred to. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Adams. Did the zoning subcommittee have anything on that?
I think what's happened is that planning board has decided that a conversion is going to be by special permit regardless. In this case, we're saying that a duplex that is not owner occupied is also by special permit. So regardless of what percentage it is, those kinds of structures, those kinds of things will be by special permit. I guess we didn't, so she's referring to the petition language, which we're actually interested in, but we have not really had time to go over it. Petition language for two-family dwellings.
Thank you, Mr.
That makes it
Khan.
specific, so.
Yes, Mr. Tucker?
As I said before, in a much more long-winded fashion, the effect of both the converted dwelling amendment and the two-family dwelling amendment of the planning board amendments is to create that distinction. If they are both passed, that creates that distinction.
Thank you, Mr. Tucker. Mr. Schreiber?
I'm sorry, which distinction?
Between, with duplexes being structures that are principally created through new construction, and converted dwellings being new dwelling units being created principally through the conversion of existing fabric.
So if I may, and I'm not sure we exactly say that, because I know that that's the intent, but that's not what we actually say.
It's the effect of all of the regulation. It has that effect.
So I own a single-family house that I can convert that I want to convert into a two-family house. I think that there's still two, even if these both pass, there's still two routes that I can do that through the duplex.
Right, and what you would do is if you wanted it to be whatever size you wanted that the lot would allow, and that included more than 20% of the resulting new complete habitable space being the result of new footprint or demolition and reconstruction, then it would be a duplex if it's more than 20%. If it is less, 20% or less, then it is a converted dwelling.
Or it's a duplex, because a duplex says, and I'm sorry, because I should have vetted this beforehand, or it's a duplex because it says that in all districts shall apply provisions to any construction, renovation, or expansion resulting in the creation of a new two-family detached dwelling. So I would argue that I could choose either the converted dwelling route or this route, which I don't think is a bad thing. In other words, I don't think it's not ambiguous. It's just that there's two different ways to get from Manchester to London.
If it's less than 20%, 20% or less, then you could choose either.
Yeah.
It's
So-
both by special permit, so
Yeah.
distinction
And
without
so
a
they're
difference.
different, but
If
they're
it's
not.
mo-
So in other words, you can't mix and match.
If it's more than 20%, then it's a converted dwelling regardless.
But so I
crossed the
just wanted to be
threshold.
clear that we don't actually say under duplex that that's primarily new construction.
Would it be sufficient in this case to say that a duplex does not include any such, that would qualify as a converted dwelling? Is there some way to just?
Yes, you could add a phrase that had
I don't know
that
I don't know quite
effect.
how to fit it in there, or where, or even if it's necessary, given that they're all special permits.
That was my question, is it necessary? I think what we tried to do is make the permitting routes the same, so that somebody wasn't, I'm going to go to this board or that board or pick converted dwellings, or because one was perceived as easier or discretionary permit versus a by right. So we've tried to take those differences away. So I don't know that we need to address that distinction.
Yeah.
I'm not terribly worried about it.
Yeah, I'm not.
The net effect is the same, either way.
I see nodding heads. Was there any further, yes, ma'am, in the front?
Lisa Rubenstein, Precinct 10. This is just to clarify something. I thought during the zoning subcommittee discussion, there was some language changed in that first paragraph under section A.
Yes.
Are you looking
And
at the
it was
1016
never,
version?
Yes, she's
described
correct.
by Mr. Crowner. It said, was changed to except as may otherwise be authorized under this section. A two-family detached dwelling duplex shall have an external appearance and footprint compatible
That's right.
in
you're right.
terms of design with those of, et cetera. So
Yes,
Thank you.
that's correct.
I'm not speaking in favor or opposed.
Thank you very
but it
much.
was-
You're absolutely right.
Thank you,
Appreciate
Ms.
that
Rubenstein.
clarification. Thank you.
So that language does compatible in terms of architecture and massing, is that the?
Did we
was
say
it
design or?
It would read as Ms. Rubenstein read it.
Yeah.
Shall
Compatible
have,
in design?
shall have an exterior appearance and footprint compatible in terms of design with those of single-family detached dwellings, et cetera.
Thank you very much. Ms. Barbaret?
Denise Barber at 67 North Whitney Street, and I have a couple of, I guess I'll call them questions. I thought I knew what a duplex was. I believe there are a couple of duplexes in my neighborhood, and I was agreeing with Mr. Crowner that essentially it bears substantially the appearance of a single-family single-family home, except it houses two families. So my concern is with the language on the first page in the second full paragraph in bold and in italics, because it seems to me that the way this is written, it would essentially allow something, not to pick on this address, but it's an easy address to use for exemplary purposes, 79 Taylor Street, which to me is not a duplex. It is essentially two houses plopped down on the same lot and joined by a breezeway. And according to this language, that actually does make it a duplex. So my first question to the board is, how is this language actually going to prevent things like 79 Taylor Street? And as Mr. O'Connor mentioned, that appears to, I don't think it's caused, but I think it's exacerbated a problem with parking. If you drive along Taylor Street most evenings and sometimes certain afternoons, you will see 8 to 10 cars parked along the street, essentially changing it into a one-way street and causing problems for people who would like to pass on it. So that's my first question. The second question, possibly observation that I have, actually follows up on a previous speaker's concerns. This is looking at the list of criteria that Town Council advises to add for the non-owner occupied duplexes. And actually a little bit above that, above the section in red, it says the special permit granting authority shall require the ongoing services of a qualified professional property management company. That's fine, but it seems like a lot of the problem properties that we have now already are under the services of a qualified professional property management company. So it's nice to include the language in here, but if that's what we've got in reality, and it hasn't really had an effect on these particular properties, I'm not sure what good it's going to do just putting it in print. The other things are in the language in red under number 2. A management plan is defined in the rules and regulations shall be included as
I'll
an
just stop you, Ms. Barber. We're not considering that. It's already been recommended against by the zoning subcommittee.
2 is there.
That's 3 and 4.
2, 3,
Oh.
and 4.
My apologies. Please
Okay.
continue. I'm sorry.
Yeah, it seems, if I'm remembering correctly, with proposals that come before the board, you already need a management plan. So I'm not sure why this is being written into the regulations as well. And again, it's fine to have a management plan, but I'm just wondering how many of these particular properties that are already problematic have management plans as well. I think Taylor Street had a management plan. I wasn't on the board at that time, but I believe that parking was discussed and what they're going to do about trash and so on and so forth. And yet it seems like the problem of parking on that particular street has already been exacerbated. So it's fine to have these regulations, but I'm not sure what they're actually doing in reality. Thank you.
Oh, thanks, Ms. Barber.
The other thing I wanted to mention was, it seems to me that when you're writing all this stuff up, this is how it shall be done, so on and so forth, basically what you're saying is, okay, rather than special permit, we're saying, yeah, this kind of looks like a by right use. It's not site plan review, but essentially you're saying, this is going to happen no matter what. This is going to go forward no matter what. We'll just put some rules and regulations on it, rather than saying, no, this really is special permit. We need to look carefully not only at appearance, but also use and the impact that it's going to have on the neighborhood. So I'd like you to consider that. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Barbarette. I share your distaste for non-exclusive lists of conditions. So Ms. Barbarette had two questions. The first was, how does this prevent structure that is essentially two houses joined by a breezeway from being termed a duplex? Mr. Crowner?
So this language actually was developed in the wake of the 79 Taylor Street hearing, which started out as something that did not look like a duplex, or did not look like what we thought of a single structure. In my opinion, it does now. I think it may not be ideal, but it's much better than it was before. In fact, it's better than the house that was there by itself. Yeah. So it's a matter, I think, of opinion there. I think the 79 Taylor Street now has, it's not a breezeway, it's actually a room. There is actually a room that is next to the other house. So there's no way that we're going to be able to define everything exactly the way we want it. This provides the guidance that to a applicant what we want. We want something that looks like one place, but it also allows flexibility for to respond to existing conditions, to respond to a new idea, to respond to the neighborhood. So it's not perfect. I grant that it's not perfect, but I think it's an improvement.
Would would this zoning amendment as proposed have required that Taylor Street house to receive a special permit?
Yes.
And it could have been therefore denied by the
Right.
ZBA, correct? Okay. I see that as a big improvement, irrespective of the definition. I mean, Mr. Crowner?
So I want to address the second question, which is why these town council recommended conditions are in the zoning bylaw rather than in a submittal requirement or planning board rules and regulations. We had the same response. That these are not typical zoning bylaw language, but because town council is recommending that, it's part of the preemptive defense of the changes that we're making. So having these in the bylaw says this is why we think these should be regulated differently because they need these kinds of requirements. So it's, again, it's not ideal, but it's responding to conditions in the best way that we can right now.
Mr. Schreiber?
Are you referring to the whereases or?
No, I'm referring to the town council.
Oh, okay.
List of criteria.
Oh,
criteria.
can I still
Yes,
speak?
yes, Mr. Schreiber.
So I think that one of the weaknesses of, one of the reasons that the management plan is in here is because now it becomes a much clearer zoning enforcement issue, whereas before it was in the rules and regs and a much more ambiguous enforcement. So I think actually the appropriate place for it is explicitly in the zoning bylaw, so that it becomes, explicit that that's something that can be enforced.
Okay. Yes, Mr. O'Keefe?
And so I just wanted to add to that, it hasn't been mentioned yet, but the second half of condition number 2 also requires a response plan describing the concrete steps to be taken by the property owner or management in response to complaints, et cetera. That's a new condition. That's not there now. So we're not just restating requirements that are already in the bylaw. We're actually imposing new restrictions.
Thank you, Mr. O'Keefe. Further comments? Ms. Barbara, I'm sorry, we're so short on time. All right. Does someone want to make a motion to close the public hearing?
So moved.
Or second? Moved and seconded. All in favor of closing the public hearing? Passes unanimously. Thank you very much. Any further comment or discussion on this zoning bylaw? And again, we're talking about as printed in the 1016 draft, except that it now, the first paragraph of section 3.321, the language substantially consistent in terms of architecture and massing has been changed to compatible in terms of design. And items 3 and 4 under the town council's proposed list of criteria will be deleted.
If I may.
Mr. Tucker?
Ms. Anderson was discussing earlier the paragraph just prior to that, those listed conditions that starts the special permit granting authority shall, the one about the listing of different kinds of management options. There was some discussion of putting or before the presence of as a way of indicating that that was a serial options rather than an and. Further, I would like to note that Mr. Carson pointed out to me that number 1 in red it could be better, the sentence could be better arranged to make it clearer. And I don't have that for you now, but I would like to have that option.
I think we got to go with the language that's on there, Mr. Tucker. We can't, I don't think we can vote on something that you're then going to change.
All right, let's see. Names and contact information of the owner, any responsible rental property management entity, and at least one on-site resident responsible for, and this was the part we didn't have yet, shall be provided. That
responsible for what?
What Mr. Carson was talking about was that there is a provision in one of the other amendments to talk about having an on-site resident identified as a person, in all cases, a person who is responsible for responding to whatever's going on with the property, whether it's the police calling, whether it's a Board of Health inspector, whatever it is.
Why don't we delete the word responsible?
At least one, there you go.
I'm
Mr.
sorry, I
Schreiber?
know we're short on time. So in the paragraph right above that, we say something incredibly similar. So I wonder if those two paragraphs could simply be melded. The special plan, yeah, you can all read that.
Which is the one that is incredibly.
The special permit granting authority shall require the ongoing services of a qualified professional property management company, the presence of an on-site resident.
Or the presence of.
Right. Then shouldn't we just simply say names and contact information for, yeah. Yeah,
Mr. O'Keefe?
Just leave it the way it is.
I have one more question about the responsible or the on-site resident, whether they're responsible or not. We're talking about the submission requirements for the special permit. And so I find it unlikely that the applicant would, at the time of applying for the special permit, have a name of a responsible on-site resident.
Right.
And furthermore, that would quickly become outdated. So would there, this doesn't include any requirement to keep that current, or, you know, the special permit gets issued, but that's it. There's no follow-up.
I think that requiring an on-site resident is one of the things that's certainly been mentioned in the context of a rental permitting bylaw, general bylaw. I see Ms. Anderson nodding.
We often require applicants to come back at a certain point to show us or so that we could see the lighting or the planting, so we could ask them to come back with the,
What
bearing
this
the name
do-
of the
And it
responsible.
wouldn't be us either. In most cases, it would be
building.
This
in
set-
every case,
yeah.
it would be the ZBA.
This sets up specific conditions that you would attach to the permit, is what it does.
I don't see as much of a problem with it as you do, Mr. O'Keefe.
I guess I don't really see it as a problem. I was just pointing it out as a potential issue that might need to
Agreed.
be considered.
Duly noted. Does anyone have any argument with just deleting the word responsible as a way to revise this,
I think that covers it.
to
And
resolve your,
You can then you can then determine the level of responsibility at the permit stage.
Excuse me.
yes, Ms.
Could you read the wording that you have?
Item 1 of the town council's list of criteria would end with the phrase, "and at least one on-site resident."
So the only thing that's
Also-
happening is the word responsible is coming out.
The rest of the sentence is remaining the same?
Yes.
And under the previous paragraph, we'll insert the word "or" before, after property management company and before the presence of an on-site manager in line 2. All right. Does someone want to make a motion? Mr. Crowner?
I move to recommend two-family dwelling article town meeting as amended tonight.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? All right, all in favor? That passes unanimously. Thank you, everyone. Now we're going to have a short public hearing on the planning board rules, which we've been trying to get to for months. Ms. Brestrup, do I have a preamble for this, or?
You do not have a preamble because the hearing was opened on September 5th in front of the entire board, so I didn't give you a preamble for this one.
This is a continuing.
Okay, thank you. So this hearing is a public hearing to see if the planning board will amend Article 2, Section 3, subsection B, site plan review submittals of the Amherst Planning Board Rules and Regulations to add requirements for submittals as follows. And this is adding language to Section K with respect to mowing and upkeep of landscaping, item N, building maintenance, and the requirement that for any residential rental use, a proposed lease and the following be submitted: a current emergency notification information, current registration of all residential dwelling units in accordance with the applicable rental regulations of the town of Amherst. Do these proposed changes work for staff in terms of submissions to the planning board for site plan review?
Yes.
Does anybody on the board have any issue with these? If not, I would suggest that someone make a motion.
Move to approve? Is that the right?
Is the public hearing still open, though? Is it?
Oh, I guess we have to close the public hearing.
Move to close the public hearing?
Do we check to see if there's?
Oh, is there any public comment? Okay, didn't think there would be, but
I move to close the public hearing.
thank you, Mr. Carson.
Wait, second.
All in favor? Public hearing is closed.
Move to approve?
Further discussion? That was moved by Mr. Schreiber, second by Ms. Ford, and come to a vote. All in favor? That passes unanimously. Thank you, everyone. Here's when we can check off the list.
Good or done?
Next public hearing. In accordance with the provisions of Section 5 and 11 of Chapter 48, this public hearing has been duly advertised, notice thereof has been posted and mailed to the Mass Department of Housing and Community Development, the Pioneer Valley Planning Commission, and abutting towns. This hearing is being held for the purpose of providing an opportunity for interested citizens to be heard regarding the proposed amendment to the Amherst zoning bylaw. This amendment will be on the warrant for the annual town meeting. A0713, residential zoning definitions. To amend Article 12, definitions of the zoning bylaw, to amend existing definitions and add selected new definitions for terms associated with residential uses, brought by the zoning subcommittee. Mr. Crowner.
So this is, in the course of developing the rental, or the residential use articles, several definitions were created, or we realized that we needed some definitions to clarify our language. And so at one point they were added to one of the other articles, but not all of them actually related to that article, so we broke them off. These apply to specific articles or the bylaw in general. So we're proposing to add a definition for dwelling unit, which doesn't exist. We're proposing to clarify or expand the definition of family, and also called household. So we had decided before not to mess with the for unrelated business, the functional family, because that's very complicated. We want to get back to it, but regardless of what you think a functional family is, there are people that we clearly recognize as family that are not covered by our current language. People in civil unions, people in guardianships, and other kinds of relationships. So those need to be added, as well as people living in group homes. They're living together, but they're not necessarily related. There might be more than 4 of them. So those need to be added just to make our bylaw inclusive. A new definition of habitable space, so that we have a common understanding of what habitable space is. It's all of the enclosed interior space used for all the aspects of living. In other words, it's not just it's not the porch, it's not the garage, so on. It's where you actually live. We're adding a note to the owner-occupant definition. That stays the same, but we're referencing principal residence, which is a new definition because the duplex and single-family amendments refer to principal residence. We want to make clear what we mean by that. So we're talking about a place that is the primary residence of a person, and then describing how it's determined what the primary residence is. And so there's a list of qualifications, or a list of evidence that needs to be demonstrated. Not all of it, but a preponderance of it, including a declaration of homestead, where you file your taxes, where you vote from, and so on. It also allows, it does not require that you're living there continuously, permanently, but it is your permanent residence, but there's a provision for temporary absence as a result of illness and other things. Finally, a new definition of resident manager. There's when we refer to resident managers, we want to clarify that it actually means someone who lives at the property, not someone who lives near the property or near several properties. It's a person who lives at the property. There's additional language here that's not reflected on your the 1015 thing. Before responsible in the first line, we're adding qualified and. So a live-in resident of residential use, qualified and responsible for managing and coordinating the maintenance and so on. Oh, yes. And then also, a deletion in the principal residence item. In the second line there at the end, it says resides or intends to reside. We're deleting or intends to reside. It's where you reside. So.
Thank you, Mr. Crowder. Questions or comments from the board? Questions or comments from the public? Yes, Ms. Rubenstein.
Lisa Rubenstein, Precinct 10. I just wanted to reflect that there was quite a bit of discussion about the resident manager, that definition, and what qualified means. And I think the compromise was that qualifications should be cross-referenced. I'm still unclear where we're being sent, but there's a genuine worry that someone is just going to be picked at random as one of the tenants to be the resident manager. We have instances of this already, just saying, okay, you're the manager. It's just one person of many. There's no kind of process for determining if this is just a loophole that they're getting around or they're really intending to comply. So I would urge the group to consider how they will make this enforceable.
Thank you, Ms. Rubenstein. I think that's a very good point. I think that to some extent this particular provision may be clarified through the general bylaw rental regulations. Was there, I mean, it sounds like it was already, the words qualified and were already added tonight. Was there a cross-reference, and what was the rest of the?
What this was doing was establishing a general definition. Then when you get to the specific land uses under which this would be applied, for instance, the two-family dwellings we were just looking at, on the second page there, the section about the special permit granting authority shall require, et cetera, that ends with or similar provision for the proper management of the rental use as a condition of approval. It was felt that you have the general definition, you have the requirements under the permit for the specific use, you have the information that's requested as part of the management plan, and that then the permitting body itself is working out whether or not on an individual basis someone is qualified or not. One of the comments that was made was that there was some discussion of trying to establish an age limit in some communities in their rental regulations, not usually in their zoning bylaw, will establish an age limit for an in-house manager of 25 years or older, something to that effect. The subcommittee was concerned that because this is zoning, you're dealing with the possibility of ageism or something like that. And there was also the possibility that someone is 20 years old and they've been managing properties for 5 years professionally, you know, working with their parents or something. There are just too many different circumstances to dictate a very specific and narrow set of qualifications for this. And as in all cases, you create the broad authority, and then it is the discretion of the permit granting body to determine what qualification means. But the point of adding it was to assure that it would be considered.
Thank you, Mr. Tucker. More comments from the board about that? Mr. O'Connor?
I have a couple of brief comments. I've been a tenant for the entire time. I've lived in the town of Amherst. Vince O'Connor, 175 Summer Street, number 12. And I just think that we want these these regulations to focus on the facts rather than create sort of fictions. And I just would urge the board not to require, you can require that the grounds be mowed, but I really object to having the boards ask for a schedule of mowing. I just think that's just way beyond what's necessary. Most of all but a few of the
I think you're on the wrong, we've already opened and closed that public hearing, Mr. O'Connor. We've moved on to residential zoning definitions.
Okay. On those definitions, I would urge the same thing as I would have urged here, is to stay away from things that are so specific and so futuristic that they essentially involve people making up things that I think are just the waste of time of management people, and just urge you to focus on concrete factual things and rather than on requirements that are futuristic. And I think almost all of the bylaws that have come up to date have these kind of things in them. You know, what will you do in case of an incident? What will you do in, your scheduled mowing and so forth? And on this regard, I just would urge the board to take those things out which require this kind of futuristic proposals and focus on concrete things that exist now.
Duly noted, Mr. O'Connor. Thank you. Further public comment?
Move to close the public hearing.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor? Oh, we have another comment.
Sure.
We'll leave that motion on the table. Mr. Fox?
John Fox, Precinct 10. I was sitting there and looking at what he's or the person is responsible for. And it's for managing and coordinating the main housekeeping and administrative duties for the raffle units. I'm wondering if that's too limited. What we had some discussion of during the prior meeting was we really want to make sure that the students are behaving, or the tenants are behaving in a way consistent with any special permit or permitting requirement. So I'm wondering whether there should be added to this, including coordinating or managing the property in a way consistent with conditions of any permitting authority. And that would address noise issues and parking issues and other things beyond just, making sure that the grass is mowed, et cetera. I mean, those conditions are crucial to helping maintain order in that house and in the neighborhood. So I don't have the exact language for you, but I think it ought to incorporate the oversight of conditions imposed by the permitting granting authority. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fox. And I agree with you. Was there any discussion of this in the zoning subcommittee? Mr. Crowner?
So I don't think anywhere in the bylaw is a on-site resident manager actually required.
Well, there is actually.
No, it's not. It's not required. It's
an option.
It's an option.
Okay.
So what this definition does is, if you choose that option, this is what it means to have resident manager. So those conditions that have been suggested are good. Actually, they make sense. But they should also be applied to qualified professional property management company and similar provision for proper management. I mean, it's what we mean by management. It includes controlling the behavior of or responding to the conditions of the permit.
Compliance with applicable permits and regulations is all included under management.
I think so, yeah.
Mr. Tucker? Mr. Schreiber?
It will be if the permit granting body decides so. And that's where this happens. Again, you go from the general in the definition because you're trying to be general, and then you get, for instance, again, under two-family dwelling, and the special permit granting authority has to decide which method are we going to use to get qualified professional management of this property.
But I have to agree with Mr. Fox here that this does not, I mean, this is an exclusive list. They're to manage and coordinate the maintenance, housekeeping, and administrative duties. That's what a resident manager is.
There was discussion with the subcommittee of changing the definition to read something like responsible for management of the property and including coordination of, and so forth, so that management stood alone and could be filled with the meaning that the permit granting body needed for that particular use each time.
Mr. Schreiber?
So I see the purpose of the manager to be primarily to implement the site management plan, which is that part which is under our authority, right? In other words, we have a site management plan. The manager implements that. And so I think that if we start getting into other areas, like behavior of the tenants within, that's not specified in the site management plan, then I think we're going up a slippery slope.
You could replace the language then with responsible for implementation of the management plan or a management plan and coordinating, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah, that's
Does
what
that make sense?
I would support that.
Is it out of line to suggest that the resident manager would be responsible for compliance with applicable permits and regulations?
You might have
I mean, that's why I'm asking, it's a real question.
one of the options here, because remember, you also have or similar provision for management of the rental use as one of the options that the permit granting body could use, is that the live-in manager has in fact limited duties, and the principal responsibility for implementation of permit requirements doesn't reside with the live-in manager. It instead resides with the management company or the owner. So this is what I'm talking about. You have this range of possibility, any of which might be the most responsible and appropriate thing to do for an individual use, but until you've done the permitting for that individual use, you don't know what it is. And that's why it's created in this way.
Ms. Anderson?
Just an observation, wouldn't the resident manager be an agent of the owner?
Yes, usually.
And therefore responsible for anything that the owner would be responsible for?
Mm-hmm.
I should have my microphone, I'm sorry.
Technically, an agent is only responsible for the things that the principal tells them to do. So it could be beyond the scope of their duties.
I think, if I may, I think the language proposed, responsible for implementation of a management plan and coordinating the maintenance, et cetera, covers that ground. The fact that it discusses that these are under their charge makes it clear that they are somebody's agent, or they are themselves an owner could be a live-in resident manager too.
Well, Ms. Kruger,
I'm just worried that as we start with our basic definition, that if we try to put into the definition what we think is a really good resident manager, or what set of tasks a resident manager might perform, we're going to get, I think I'm agreeing with Mr. Tucker, we're going to get to a level of detail that makes this sort of unwieldy for us as a definition section of the bylaw. And I know people were at the zoning subcommittee wanting to strengthen as many sections of the draft language in a couple of the bylaws as possible, as a way to confront and solve some of the neighborhood behavior problems. But I'm not sure it can all happen in here in the definition section.
Well, I mean, I'll go along with whatever the group feels like on this. I think that it's all going to be up to the discretion of the permit granting authority, and so I'm content to leave it to their discretion. And I think that any permit granting authority in this town is going to consider whether that resident manager will, what they'll do, I guess. It just does seem a little vague. Yes, Ms. Brestrup.
I just wondered if someone would read what the final language is.
Well, we don't have it yet. Mr. Fox, do you want to quickly come up and suggest something?
Fox Precinct 10. The whole effort to have a resident manager is to control the behavior. I mean, that's the focus, is to control the behavior of the people residing in that place. And the definition that you have doesn't really address that. So it's really important that, I mean, housekeeping and reporting, you know, and administrative duties, these are just formalities. So I think it's really important that whatever definition you use, that it clearly identify the responsibilities to control the conduct as specified in the permitting granting authority. Now, I don't know what the management agreement's going to be, but it strikes me that it may be more limited than the full range of what the permitting authority has asked. So without saying that the manager is responsible for implementing or overseeing what the permitting granting authority has imposed as conditions for this unit, I think you've sort of missed the heart and soul of what we're trying to do.
Thank you, Mr. Fox. Ms. Adams?
Maureen Adams, Precinct 10. I think that some of this permitting language that we've been tussling with is in 10.38. And I think that if we noted that since these are the conditions for the permitting, they involve noise, pollution, hazards, all of the issues that are also covered under nuisance bylaws and noise bylaws, that putting that into the language of the role of the resident manager would satisfy our arguments for wanting to have a resident manager. And it's in the jurisdiction of zoning because it's right there in 10.38. Thank you.
10.38, Ms. Adams?
The specific findings that are required by the permitting body on page 94 in the new definition.
Forgot mine.
I mean, that's really your welcome.
Thank you.
Afterwards.
All right, so these are the findings required for a special permit. They are extensive. And I don't see, let's see if they cover, nuisance due to air, noise, beer. No, it doesn't say that.
If I may, I think this sort of illustrates the point I was making earlier. It is the task of the permit granting body to go through all of that and ensure that the permit that they grant and the conditions they attach to it, including whatever responsibilities are assigned to a live-in resident manager as opposed to a property management company, as opposed to the institution that owns the property, as opposed to the individual owner of the property, to ensure that all does those things. Otherwise, we'll be repeating those in every single section of the zoning bylaw. The way this works is you have a generalized definition. It is then implemented by the conditions under the use category, and it is then made real by the permit granting body.
I agree that this is a possible issue, but I'm prepared to support this with just the language qualified and added. I think the zoning subcommittee has spent substantial time crafting this definition, and also, as Ms. Adams has pointed out, the specific findings required under a special permit include exactly the type of thing that you're talking about already. I don't know that it makes a lot of sense to require a resident manager to become a zoning enforcement officer by the terms of the definition. It just seems unnecessary to me. Mr. O'Keefe.
So I agree with that to some extent. And I also don't think that the definition should require that a resident manager be a resident law enforcement officer either. I think that the zoning cannot specify who controls specific behaviors. But I do think that the most basic responsibility in my mind of a resident manager is, as has already been mentioned tonight, the implementation of the management plan. And so I do like that suggested language, and it sounds like the comments that we've been hearing from the public are by and large supportive of that as well. And so I would propose, just as specific language, a live-in resident of a residential use qualified and responsible for the implementation of the property's management plan and for managing and coordinating and so on as already written.
Sounds good to me. I see nodding heads.
I have a very technical grammar question. Should management plan be capitalized because it's the management plan that we're referring to that comes from the approved permit? And there was another place earlier tonight we approved something where I had that question and didn't ask it.
Yes,
It's not any management plan that somebody hands the resident.
The site management plan, I think, is the official name.
It's broader, it's broader than site.
What does
It's a question of style, you know, it's not a requirement.
So for our rules and regs, we call it site management plan.
Yeah, and it is sometimes called other things in the bylaw.
I don't know, that's a hard one.
It's all caps.
Well, I mean, it just says management plan, it doesn't say site management.
Right.
Mr. O'Keefe, do you have any?
I just heard out of the corner of my ear Ms. Kruger say something to something along the lines of the implementation of the management plan as defined by the permit granting authority or as considered by the permit granting authority.
Schreiber was whispering in my ear. It's perhaps implied.
Yeah, I think it gets too complicated.
Yeah,
if we-
I'm happy with the
I'm
language I
good.
proposed, lowercase, to
Yeah.
Fine.
capture the general concept of a management
Maybe we
plan.
could capitalize just the vowels.
Okay, in the interest of time,
Insanity.
in the interest of time, I
Before we
propose
get
that we
into
move
specifying the
to
font.
move forward with Mr. O'Keefe's language. I see nodding heads.
So are you waiting for a second, or are you amending?
No, I think we had consensus on that. Or do we have consensus on it? No, there's a motion on the table.
There is a motion on the table to close public hearing. Is there- Yeah, no. Any further discussion? I'm sorry, Mr. Connor, in the interest of time, we'll get to you on the next public hearing. Okay, all in favor of closing the public? That passes unanimously. Any further discussion on the zoning amendment? We have a motion? Mr. Connor?
I move to recommend the residential zoning definitions article as amended tonight.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Further discussion? All in favor? Oh,
No, I'm sorry. There was a footfall, I got it.
Oh, okay.
Ahead
All right.
of the phone.
Okay. All right, all in favor?
False start.
That's unanimous. Thank you. All right. The next public hearing is The preamble's already been read. 80313, replacement of existing structures containing dwelling units. To add a new section 3.14, prohibiting the creation of any additional dwelling units beyond the number of residential units lawfully existing on a given property prior to any demolition and reconstruction of existing residences or structures on said property. And I'll just go ahead and read this in its entirety. To see if the town will vote to amend the zoning bylaw by adding the following new section, 3.14, replacement of previously existing structures or structures containing dwelling units. Notwithstanding any other article or section of this bylaw, no permit shall be granted to reconstruct, rebuild, or replace on any lot in any zoning district a structure containing residential units or a non-residential structure which has been demolished or destroyed other than an act of God with more residential units than previously existed on that lot or consisting of more residential square footage than previously existed on that lot. This is a citizen petition. Do we have a citizen to speak to this? Mr. O'Connor?
I think there's a missing word in the copy of this. I think that in the second to the last line, the petition had a word that more residential, with more residential units than previously lawfully existed on that lot or legally existed on that lot. Don't have the
Legally.
You're correct, Mr. O'Connor. I have the language, and there is a previously legally existed. You're
Legally
correct.
existed.
Okay. So,
And also, there's a missing word by before act of God.
and, right, okay, that did sound strange, and that's why.
Thank you, Mr. O'Connor. Were you here to speak to the essence of the
I've
article?
been asked to speak to this, yes. The initial thought on this is to essentially, in areas that have been, where there have been properties being bought up for rental purposes, and in some cases, the efforts of the new property owners to subdivide the dwellings have been turned down by the Zoning Board of Appeals to prevent what I guess are known as knockdowns, where you take down an existing structure, really create a hole in the streetscape of an existing neighborhood and replace it by something entirely of a different nature. I think since that time, an additional possibility has arisen. The Historical Commission last night recommended, and the Select Board agreed, that that a local historic district committee should be established for North Amherst, North Amherst Center, and without defining the boundaries and so forth, the board said, we're willing to create a committee, we're willing to have you look at the entirety of North Amherst and take a look at what should be in, what should be out. And there's been a recent book written about and photographs published about North Amherst. And so that seems, so it seems as though this bylaw might dovetail into that effort. Also in the residential neighborhood that essentially constitutes the single-family residential area of Precinct 10, there has been a request by letter sent to the Historical Commission to do the exact same thing in that area. And so, and this is where I think I would be interested in discussing this this item with, maybe further with the zoning subcommittee, since we have a very late opening town meeting, that it may be that we should take a look at this in terms of maybe a time-limited provision that would protect neighborhoods where you have local historic district committees, either voted to be established by the select board or requested, so that those neighborhoods, while the establishment of a committee that might protect existing structures would be in a very substantial way. In other words, be able to prohibit knockdowns rather than essentially say what you couldn't do after you took a building down, to protect those existing neighborhoods from some piecemeal activity that might occur between now and what usually is a 2 or 3 year period during which the Historic District Committee goes through the entire process of making a recommendation. I think that the committee that dealt with the Emily Dickinson House probably took that period of time. So I'm saying that I think it has, the original purpose I think is valuable and useful, but I think that in the interim, a couple of things have happened with regard to local historic districts, one of which is...
So can I just ask you, are you a proponent of this article, or are you now saying that you
No,
don't believe it's
I'm a
necessary?
proponent of the article for both the original reason and I think for the additional reasons of the historic district, one, the approval of by the select board of a committee for North Amherst, and the request for such a committee for the single-family residential area precinct 10.
So I have a question for you about the effect of this. Say that I own a rundown 2-bedroom ranch in a neighborhood of larger homes, and I want to tear it down and put up a structure more in keeping with the neighborhood. This would prevent me from doing that?
Only if it went forward as it is. If you wanted to make such a provision, this article could be modified and to include some process by which the historical commission or some such body, the design review committee, would be able to take a look at the house. Somebody would say, look, I'd like to knock this house down. This is what I'd like to build in its place. And there could be a sign-off, and it would be a public process where the neighbors would have some say.
Thank you.
I think that would essentially take care of that exception, which I think is a reasonable one. And I would certainly, and actually I've had this particular thing suggested before.
Thank you.
I think that this would be a reasonable limitation on this article.
Okay, let's hear from the zoning subcommittee on this.
So we didn't get this discussion at all, and actually it seems what he's discussing seems beyond the scope of the article. But so our understanding of the article is that it would prohibit or it would restrict new residential growth across the board all over town for almost any purpose if there's an existing structure. And we felt that the language as it exists is not exactly clear. It doesn't exactly do what the proponents wanted to do, think it should do, and it's a little confusing. So the recommendation of the zoning subcommittee is to recommend defeat of this article as it currently stands. We understand that that members of the neighborhood in precinct 10 might move an amended version of this article that might better address the actual goals that they want to attain. So if some language can be worked out, we might want to look at it again before town meeting, but as it stands, it's way too broad. It completely restricts residential growth that we might actually want. So for instance, you could not knock down the Kentucky Fried Bank and build a mixed-use building there. This would disallow that. And that just seems, completely against what we want to see happen. So, and there are various other examples that we could come up with that are objectionable. So, so we don't like the article as it is currently written, but we recognize that there's a possibility that could be refined and might achieve the goal better.
Thank you, Mr. Crowner. So let's see if there are any comments from the rest of the planning. Questions? Okay, Mr. Connor, if you could cede your chair, we'll hear comments from the public. Ms. Adams, briefly, please.
Maureen Adams of Precinct 10. I think one of the things that we had a chance to talk about earlier with the zoning subcommittee was that the intention and the actual technical language are not exactly the same, and that we had brought this because we had failed with the Historic Commission with kind of a barn and a garage in question in an area that we are now proposing as a historical district. And so we were trying, with the pressure of time, to find the kind of language that would meet the needs of the neighborhood. And I think we had a very interesting discussion. I'm very glad that Mr. O'Connor was able to join us now. In the earlier part of the evening, I had presented this with the zoning subcommittee, and we talked about some ways of limiting the range of the language. For example, we were thinking that we might refer to RG only because this is where this idea originated, and that was in response to Ms. Brestrop saying, you might have a rural building that should come down and should not be regulated by this. I believe that the zoning subcommittee also suggested that a special permit might be a way to go forward with this. So I think that Mr. O'Connor and I and a number of other people are quite ready to think about work with Mr. Tucker and others to come up with language that we can propose as an amendment, a more limited amendment at the town meeting itself.
Thank you, Ms. Adams. So I basically I'm hearing both proponents of the article say that it's not quite ready yet. So I'm disinclined to spend any more time on it tonight until there are substantial revisions. Did you have a comment, ma'am? Please come forward. Just real quick.
Laura Fitch, Precinct 1. Since it's going to be this language withdrawn, what I'm saying, I'll be really quick. It's Barbara Puffer and myself definitely think that this is not suitable. It would not allow her to do anything in her commercial property now, where people have said, why don't you do stuff on the commercial property in North Amherst? We stand in strong opposition to the way it reads now, and I can't imagine anything really reading this that could be changed that we would support at this point. It would have to change completely. I don't really understand the intent.
Thank you. Mr. Jessup, did you have something? No. Okay. All right. Procedurally, again, we can either close this public hearing, continue it, whatever the board thinks is appropriate. I'd entertain a motion.
I would move to close the public hearing.
Any further discussion?
I'm sorry, I was telling Jonathan about
I
schedule.
moved to close it, and I think Kathy Ford seconded.
Any further discussion? All in favor of closing the public hearing? That's unanimous. Any further discussion on recommending the article itself? Do we have a motion, Mr. Crowner?
Discussion, I was going to say.
Oh, discussion, sure.
I think we should complete our recommendation. And then if new language comes forward, we should we should meet. I mean, we should plan to meet before town meeting and then, and reconsider if necessary.
You do have a meeting scheduled for November 7th, at which other petition articles will be considered, and if a revised version is available, then it could be discussed as old business under this title, since you've already held the hearing.
I will entertain a motion to not recommend this article as written.
So moved.
Second.
Further discussion? All in favor? Passes unanimously. Thank you, everyone. And my hopes go out that there will be substantial changes to this. Thank you. Okay. Thanks to everyone for their patience with this tonight. We're getting through a lot of business, and we're actually doing pretty well. Our next public hearing is a site plan review. In accordance with Massachusetts General Laws, Chapter 40A, these public hearings have been duly advertised and notice has been posted in the town hall and sent to abutters. The hearings are being held to provide the opportunity for interested citizens to be informed about and to comment on the proposed site plans. Do we have any, this is SPR 2013-2/M15426, 25 South Pleasant Street, Oriental Flavor LLC. Requesting site plan review approval for a change of use from a retail store to a Class 1 restaurant, including renovations to the interior space and exterior renovations, including new signage and awnings under Section 3.3520 of the zoning bylaw. Map Section 40A, Parcel 253, BG zoning district. Let's have a brief presentation from the applicant. Before we start, do we have any disclosures from board members? Hearing none, please proceed.
Thank you very much. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen of the Planning Board. I'm Tom Reedy. I'm an attorney with Bacon Wilson in Amherst, Peter McConnell's office. I'm here on behalf of the applicant Oriental Flavor. Tonight with me, I've got the owner of Oriental Flavor, Chungwei Zhang, and the individual who's going to be the manager of the restaurant, Feng Pan. Also, from Kuhn Riddle Architects, John Kuhn and Lindsay Schnarr. As the board pointed out, we're seeking a change of use currently. It's a retail store at 25 South Pleasant Street. It's in the general business district, municipal parking, design review, and town common overlay districts. The proposed use is a Class 1 restaurant pursuant to Section 3.352.0 of the town bylaw. Such a use is permitted by right with site plan review. And that's why we're here this evening. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through the management plan, save a couple of them, and I think it'll be a good portion to transition to the architects for some exterior renovation discussion.
Okay, you can make it relatively brief. We do have all your written materials.
Okay, excellent. So I guess I'll focus on a couple points. The first was we received an email from the fire department through the planning board that they did not like that the storage of the cardboard trash was going to be under the fire escape. We've addressed that, so that will no longer be the case. What will happen is that the applicant has contracted with Amherst Trucking, and they will be picking up the trash on a daily basis, so there will be no outdoor storage. Other than that, the management plan is as presented in front of you. We are requesting a few waivers based on the location and the size of the restaurant. There will be no outdoor lighting, and I think Lindsay will be able to take it from here. Do you have any other questions about the management plan or zoning?
We'll bring up questions in a little while. We'll just hear your presentation first. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Hello.
Hello.
My name is Lindsay Schnarr. I'm with John Kuhn from Kuhn Riddle Architects. On behalf of Chungwei Zhang for Oriental Flavor. We are here tonight to request site plan review approval for the restaurant. Initially, we were thinking we were going to get a waiver for site plan review because of the minimal scope of changes to the exterior of the building. However, given that the construction cost is likely going to exceed $100,000, we do need to make the entrance accessible, which means shifting the door to the entrance of the building to the west. So it's currently located here, and we're shifting it about 3 feet to the west. The grade slopes up here, so that will make the grade on the exterior approximately level with the interior finished floor. So by moving that door, we make the entrance accessible, and so we have to change the storefront. And we also would like to add awnings to the storefront that faces South Pleasant Street. So we're proposing an additional 2 awnings that would fit within the storefront, allowing the columns to read independently from the awning coverage, so that the building structure is exposed. And the fabric would be changed as well. Right now it's the blue fabric that's remaining from the Scandinavian space. So that would be changed to a red fabric, which we have here. We're also proposing to paint the exterior storefront. Right now it's a dark blue trim, matching that blue awning from the Scandinavians, to a light white color that would match the granite. That color is shown here. And this color was chosen both to match the granite and to match the adjacent storefront of the Metacomet restaurant that's proposed next door, as well as some gold trim, which would go around the interior framing of the windows. The signage would be individually mounted letters that would go along the granite banding on the top, and they would likely be either painted gold or a metal with a red edge, so that they would be extruded from the face of the building. And then the other changes that are being proposed are along the back of the building. So the kitchen will be located in the 1-story space that's at the back of the 3-story building. And the exhaust hood for the kitchen will penetrate through the roof in the back, and there will be 3 foot by 3 foot exhaust hood back there on the top of the roof. There's already some existing mechanical systems up there, so the roof is not necessarily the most pristine landscape already. And I believe that that's it for the changes that we have proposed.
Thank you.
Oh, there's one other thing. It was addressed in the site visit that there was a light fixture that would need to be changed at this back door. It's not a public door, but this light fixture is being proposed to change as well. And we have a picture of that fixture here. Any questions?
That would be good, thank you. Okay, so the board held a site visit this morning, well, Wednesday, October 15th. That's not right, but Monday morning. And the board members observed the following. It's in downtown Amherst, next to the Bank of America building. This is a flat site that stretches from South Pleasant Street back to the alleyway along Amherst Cinema, which is at the back. The building's already been described, and the provisions for handicapped accessibility were discussed. Lighting, the board members viewed lighting and a rear door, and noted the fire escape at the rear of the building where currently trash and recyclables are being stored. It says here the applicants plan to store trash in a different location. which is yet to be identified. I believe their plan says they're negotiating with the Metacomet restaurant next door for trash location. And then the one light over the doorway was noted. We have a development application report from staff that notes a couple of items. The applicant is requesting waivers from the landscape plan, lighting plan, soil erosion plan, and traffic impact statement. This is in the municipal parking district. The lighting plan issue is with respect to the addition of the back light. Erosion control plan, there's no erosion on the site. Traffic impact, they're requesting a waiver because there aren't any cars entering or leaving the site. With respect to signs, Ms. Brestrup, could you explain this section on signs and tell us briefly what it means?
Essentially, the signs comply with the zoning bylaw that restricts the area of signs to 10% of building walls. They have a sign that they're proposing over the front facade, which is individual letters on the building, and then they have a sign on the door that they're proposing, and then they have Chinese characters that they're proposing for the windows, and the total area of signs for both facades is less than 10% of those walls.
Thank you. There's no room on the site for landscaping. There are awnings to be added. We have a management plan which was submitted. Again, it's a restaurant. There's handicapped accessibility. The fire department did submit an email dated October 5th discouraging the restaurant from storing trash containers under the fire escape. And the town engineer, did we get something from the town engineer finally on this one? No? Okay, so nothing from the town engineer. No changes to the architecture of the building, and this is within the design review board's area of jurisdiction. The design review board heard from the applicant on September 4th and recommended approval of the proposal without conditions. The management plan discusses, again, the various things that have already been brought up. I'm not sure that there's anything in here that needs further discussion except for snow removal, which is mentioned that it'll be completed in compliance with the bylaw. They're working with the landlord to address snow removal. This is going to be a 38-seat restaurant offering what sounds like very tasty food. No outdoor dining, 8 to 10 employees, 7 days a week, 6:30 a.m. to 9:30 p.m. No alcohol this time. Takeout will be offered. There's no current plans to offer delivery service, but it's possible. No live music, background music only. It's a smallish restaurant, which they're anticipating the HVAC systems to be energy efficient and quiet. They're proposing to address outdoor gathering of people waiting in line to provide a number and a waiting time to make sure that they don't block the doorway or the sidewalk. There'll be an odor control mechanism on the exhaust. Waste oil management has been arranged for. Litter will be controlled, and deliveries will be taken care of in the back and or the front, both of which are currently used for deliveries, as far as I know. We have the required pictures of the site, and here's the email from the fire department discouraging the trash receptacles, and that's basically what we have in our packet. Are there any questions or comments from the board on this application?
You had, referring to the management plan, talked about trash receptacle negotiation with the other restaurant, but what I thought I heard at during the earlier part of the presentation was that they had arranged to have the trash picked up daily. Maybe that's in lieu of or until there's a negotiation. So I heard two different things about trash, and I just wasn't clear what the trash plan was at this point.
Mr. Reedy?
Thank you. Yes, you heard correctly. They've entered into a one-year contract with Amherst Trucking to come and pick up the trash. There will be no outdoor receptacle. Everything will be stored inside the building, and Amherst Trucking will have access to the trash inside of the building.
Thank you. Further questions? Okay. Were there any comments or questions from the public? Hearing none, entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
Second.
Any further discussion on closing the public hearing? All in favor? Passes unanimously. The public hearing is closed. I suggest that we conduct our deliberations in the context of going through the site plan review criteria in the interest of time. So just don't wait for me to call on you. Please just speak and stop me because I'm going to be going through this relatively quickly. This is the criteria for site plan review under section 11.24 of the zoning bylaw. The following criteria and guidelines are used by the board in evaluating the site plan and all the information submitted as part of the application. 11.240, conformance with all appropriate provisions of the bylaw. Staff has represented that it meets those conditions. 2401, protection of town amenities and abutting properties from detrimental or offensive actions. We haven't heard of any of those. Protection of abutting properties from light and noise. 2402, we've heard in the application that those things will be controlled. 2403, recreational facilities is inapplicable. 2410, protection of historic features seems sufficient. 2411, refuse disposal has been arranged for. 2412, sewage and water supply are already existing. 2413, actually, we don't have anything from the town engineer. Is that, Ms. Brestrup?
It's not unusual for the town engineer not to send comments on a downtown property where there aren't any exterior changes being made.
Thank you. Any concerns from the board on that one? 2414 is landscaping, that's inapplicable. 2415, soil erosion is inapplicable. 2416, protection of adjacent properties from air, water, pollution, etc. Those have all been provided for in the application. 2417, also taken care of. 2418, floods is inapplicable. 2419, wetlands is inapplicable. 2420, remind me what zoning district we're in? Well, it's Design Review Board and the National Historic Register District. The Design Review Board has already heard from this, so I'll say this is inapplicable to us. 2421 is, we do have a change to an entrance to make it handicapped accessible, which is commendable. 2422, inapplicable. 2423, there's no changes to the architecture of the building. 2424, screening is inapplicable. 2430, access is being improved. 2431, curb cuts is inapplicable. 2432, parking spaces, etc. is inapplicable. Is there any provision for bicycle rack? There's bike racks downtown already. 2433, inapplicable. 2434, inapplicable. 2435, inapplicable. 2436. Do I hear any objections to waiving the traffic impact report? 2437 is inapplicable. Any further comment from the board, Mr. Crowner?
So the trash plan seems good now, but I feel like we should condition that if it changes, somebody knows about it. We know about it or something.
Noted. So that would be a condition that, do you have a proposed remedy for that situation, Mr. Crowner?
If alternate trash arrangements are, I guess if external trash storage is contemplated, they should return to the board.
Okay.
At some point in the future.
So that'll be one of our conditions. There's one other thing. Oh, if delivery service is ever implemented, I think that we would also need them to come back from that. If they're gonna be running deliveries out of that site, I think it might warrant coming back to see, because there's already so much coming and going from that. People can decide whether that's really needed or not. That's one thing I had just. Unless by bicycle. We can also just leave it alone. It doesn't, it's neither here nor there to me. I hear no one fighting for it, so we'll just forget that one. Anything else? So we only have the one condition in addition to our standard conditions. Ms. Brestrup.
Some of the conditions don't apply because there isn't any landscaping. And we have had second thoughts about keeping the condition that says that this permit expires in 2 years if not acted upon, because there's a new state law that extends permits till 2016, and the provision for permits expiring in 2 years is already in the state law and in the bylaw, so that's probably not a useful one to keep. So the only ones that would be relevant would be the one about downcast or shielded lighting and returning with final revised site plans if there are any changes, which in this case I don't think there are. Is that right?
Does the applicant have anything to add?
We would be willing to submit a revised management plan at the time to take care of the trash issue.
All right. If there's no further discussion, I would entertain a motion. Ms. Kruger.
I would move that we approve the application, site plan review 2013-00002 for 25 South Pleasant Street, applicant Oriental Flavor LLC, with the condition that had just been stated about the trash and the applicable standard conditions.
Ms. Kruger, do we have a second? Second. I think Mr. O'Keefe got to it first. Any further discussion? All in favor? Passes unanimously. We wish you the best of luck. Thank you for coming.
Let us know when you're open.
Love a new restaurant.
All right. If you could take your discussion outside, please.
Bye.
Bye. All right.
One more.
Our second site plan review tonight is SPR 2013-3/M15469, 271 South Pleasant Street, brought by Amherst College. Renovation of the interior of the building for business use. The addition of sloped walk for an accessible entry and other site improvements under section 3.330.0 of the zoning bylaw, map 14C, parcel 91 in the RG zoning district. Will the applicant please come forward? You can,
Hi, my name's Tim Eagles. I'm an architect with EDM, working with Amherst College.
Yeah, I'm Tom Davies with Amherst College.
please proceed.
Okay. The project, as stated, is a conversion of an existing residential structure to a business use for Amherst College. Is it okay if I grab this?
Certainly.
The exterior improvements are pretty much limited, as one of the previous applicants said, to the addition of a sloped walk to the front of the building. Because of the level of renovations that are taking place inside, we exceed the $100,000 limit as well for this building, which requires us to provide accessible entry to the building. The thought process is that the college really wanted to stress on this project was to not visually do much, if anything, to the exterior and the front facade of the building. And what we've done is create a sloped walk. It will have no railings as part of it and qualify as a sloped walk as opposed to a ramp to the front of the building. It's a concrete walk that comes up this side and then transfers to a sloped porch deck up the rest of the current existing front porch to bring you up to the current floor level inside. We'll have a couple of additional new railings and steps coming down from that towards the street on the front, much in keeping with the existing architecture of the building. And that's pretty much the extent of the exterior improvements on the project. As part of that, we're removing the existing very much overgrown foundation plantings that are there, and the college will be landscaping anew in front of the building, very similar in nature to what's currently there.
Do you have an elevation picture for us? Was that in the packet?
The elevation is essentially the existing building.
Okay. Thank you.
Well, I can run through the various elements to this, the management plan and whatnot, if that would be useful. It's really all per what was provided, and there's not much that's I don't know, noteworthy, I guess. The college will be maintaining it as a college property. We'll be maintaining the landscape. We'll be doing the trash removal. The trash will be kept in the garage. There's a big garage there. This will actually add some parking spaces for overall parking for the college. There will be some minimal signage added at some point to the front of the building, in keeping with the small signs that we've added in front of other buildings like it. That's to be determined. We don't know exactly what that's going to say or be like yet. But what else would snow plowing will be by the college, and it will kind of be it'll function as a college property and be maintained as a college property.
Thank you, Mr. Davies. Sure. The board held a site visit on this. On Monday morning. They noted that it is directly across from the hockey rink on South Pleasant Street. It's a relatively flat site with a narrow driveway. The walkways have already been discussed. There's no site lighting, but there is an existing ceiling light on the porch near the front door, and there's street lighting along South Pleasant Street. This building was constructed in the early 1800s and is known as the Edward Hitchcock House after the third president of Amherst College who lived there. The front of the house, it says, is obscured by mature, overgrown shrubbery. There's a nifty octagonal tower, and that's about it from the site design. I forgot to ask if there's any conflicts on this. None. Okay. The management plan is relatively straightforward. Nothing much there. It's an Amherst College building. What, maybe I wasn't listening, but what is going to be done inside this building? What's the use going to be?
It's best way to describe it, as far as I can understand it anyway, is offices for visiting scholars, visiting scholars program. that is kind of now kind of scattered around in different places, and it will be consolidated into one location.
So officers for the visiting scholar program.
I just had some other questions.
Oh, I don't have any other questions. Go ahead, Ms. Kruger.
Well, along those lines, I was wondering how many employees would be here if, in offices, if any, and how many scholars you anticipated using this facility, and if you were going to have events, seminars, or workshops, or that kind of thing, because I'm trying to get a sense of the amount of use or the impact of the use, because I'm going to talk a little bit about parking. So I don't have a full sense from your plan of how many people are going to be there every day.
Well, it's we're not really changing the floor plan very much in the building. It's a 7-room, I think I got that right, plus kitchen house. There could be, I would say, as many as 10 people that are using this for office space. As far as events and whatnot, I can't imagine, and it just doesn't have the space to house events. And of course, the campus is right there, and if there was going to be something that would have 30 people, it would make sense to have that in, you know, an event space on the campus or a classroom or something like that. So we don't anticipate any kind of events happening there.
Thank you, Mr. Davies.
If I could follow up. So we don't have in this site plan is indication of where cars are going to park. I think you've asked for a waiver of the parking plan, and that might be a point we might want to discuss, if how much additional parking that's going to add to the campus, if any. And I suspect some people will drive up, and so I'm curious to know where they will park and what the flow will be in and out of the driveway. My only other comment was about the lighting plan, and I don't know that we need a lighting plan, but I found with the addition of the handicap walk, the one bulb light over the front door inadequate to light the sort of 30 feet of run across the porch and then over to the main sidewalk. So maybe you could talk about that, but I would be inclined to ask you to add more lighting for the handicapped area.
If I could just echo that, because we noted that the street light is quite a long distance across the road.
Yes, currently there was, as stated, there was no plan to add additional lighting between the porch light and the street lights. That's kind of the thought process currently. It's certainly possible to add additional lighting out in that location, but the idea was to keep everything low-key and more residential in feel on that side of the street. So that's why we took the tact we did with that. In terms of the parking, the thought process is there's room for about 5 cars along. It's quite a large parking area out behind the existing space. It's the way that the thought process would be used to park in there, and we've done it on occasion as we've gone, you know, into the back in mass to review and do things, is that there would be room to, you know, park about that many cars on the rear side, and then the rest of the parking would be accommodated on other parts of the campus.
Thank you, Mr. Eagles. Other questions from the board? Any comments or questions from the public? All right, then I suggest that we address any remaining issues in the context of our site plan review criteria. Oh, I'll just mention there that the applicant has requested waivers for landscape plan, lighting plan, sign plan, soil erosion plan, and traffic impact statement. Ms. Brestrup.
In this case, I did hear from the town engineer, and he has no comments.
Thank you, Ms. Brestrup. Any comment from the fire department?
No comments.
Okay. Again, site plan review criteria, 11.24 of the zoning bylaw. 11.240, conformance with provision, all appropriate provisions zoning bylaw. Appears to comply. Protection 2401, again, anyone on the board that has an issue with any of these, please just speak, don't raise your hand. 2401, minimizing detrimental actions to abutting properties. Acceptable. Protection from light and noise, acceptable. 2403, recreational facilities is, it's on the Amherst College campus, there's plenty of that. 2410, they're leaving the exterior of the house the same. Refuse disposal is addressed in the management plan. 2412, engineer agrees with the sewage and water supply. 2413, drainage, there's no changes. 2414, landscaping, any comments, questions? Nothing. Landscaping's adequate. Soil erosion plan, we're gonna waive it. 2416 is really inapplicable. 2417, there's no change to lighting. 2418,
There might be a change to lighting.
there might be a change. So let's hear from, so speak.
Okay. I would propose that we have additional adequate lighting, could be submitted to staff. I don't necessarily want them to have to come back, but I would ask that there be additional lighting for the handicapped. I know it's not a ramp per se in the technical sense, but the handicapped access route. And a lot of people not in wheelchairs will take that route with other kinds of mobility impairments, and I don't want them to get disabled on that dark walkway.
I would agree.
So, do you want to propose right now what you might do to do this, or do you want to come back with something?
Is it easy enough to, or is it possible to say that we will put in lighting that is adequate to meet the code requirements for
What are the code
lighting,
requirements for lighting?
in exterior egress way? I mean, if you call it an egress path, then you have to have whatever, some minimum lighting on it. Is that, I mean, if it's good enough for egress from a building, is it good
No,
enough for?
I'd like to, then in that case, I'd like to see it come back, because I'm not sure the code is adequate. It might be minimal, and I don't know the code.
In the past, you've put short, sort of little pole lamps.
Yeah,
bollards.
actually, we don't. The college doesn't like to do bollard lights. I guess what we could do, without too much fuss, is add additional lighting at the porch that's directional on, you know, occupancy sensor.
Then you could just submit what that's going to look like when you decide.
You don't have to come in with it, you can just submit it and we'll look at it.
Okay, sure. Does that
Well,
sound good?
yeah, I think adding additional porch lights up underneath is, you know, architecturally, we could do that very well. And then as Tom's suggesting, maybe off the building, a little bit of directional light onto the path would be fine.
I see heads nodding. So,
You might, I wasn't there at the site plan, but looking at the parking at the back of the building, and given that we're moving into the dark hours of the winter, you might consider something on that parking lot if there isn't already. Again, just a downcast, something other for cars, because people working there are gonna come out.
Right.
It's gonna be dark.
And there is exterior lighting around the rear.
Oh, okay.
But we can't tell because you didn't submit a lighting plan.
it's easier for us if you just give us a lighting plan. Just for future reference. It doesn't have to be much. Okay. Satisfactory for lighting? With, so you address those two issues and just give us something showing you've addressed them.
So, excuse me, what are the two issues?
Lighting for the sloped path and for the parking area. And that'll be, I guess, a condition on our site plan. Flood hazards inapplicable, wetlands is inapplicable. Is this 2424 applicable? No. 2421 not changing. 2422 inapplicable. 2423 nothing's changing. 2424 screening for storage areas, none is proposed, nor has anyone asked for any. 2430 access is not changing. 2431 curb cut is not changing. 2432 parking. Does anyone want to propose any conditions on parking?
I would like to see a parking plan where the cars are gonna park and enter. I don't necessarily think it has to be striped because it's more residential, but at least some kind of layout would have been helpful. I don't know if other people care. The street it's adjacent to is, when I was there, was already filled up with cars, so I don't know if there's a tipping point where Amherst College argument that we provide parking across the rest of the campus, so with each project we do, we don't have to worry about the parking at some point where that isn't that convincing to me, because I think people will drive up to this building.
So they're proposing 10 people working there, and they're proposing to have room for about 5 parking spaces based on the, Ms. Brestrup?
I just wanted to point out that there is parking on Hitchcock Road, which is right next to the site. So there were cars parked there during the day of the site visit, so
And it
that
was
is
full.
available. And it is full.
I don't have any particular concerns. This one seems acceptable to me to leave it informal.
Maybe we'll get them on the next one.
Okay. Where were we?
How about a bike rack?
Bike rack. Nice.
Did you provide a bike rack?
Have we provided one currently?
Could you provide one?
Sure.
Sure, I think that'd be a good idea.
Scattered all over the place.
Sure.
We can have, there's one across the street, across Hitchcock. There could be a bike rack here.
Sure. If there are going to be 10 people working there might be a couple of people biking.
They have a garage to put their bikes in now, so.
So did you decide that you did want a parking plan?
No.
No.
No parking. Bicycle racks.
But if there's a garage, they can put their bikes in. I mean,
there's a 2+ car garage on the backside, and the only thought is we're gonna put the garbage in there, but other than that, there is no storage.
so people would be more likely, if they have access to that, put their bikes in there. Drier, safer.
I'll let the bicycle riders have. Do you, Mr. Crowner?
Well, if they're, that's fine for the employees, I would think, but if they're gonna be receiving any visitors, I don't know. I don't know if they are or not, so.
Sure.
We like your style. Access to adjoining properties is inapplicable. Oh, so by the way, just stepping back, that bicycle rack was a condition. No change, 2435. Inapplicable, 2436. Traffic impact report. I heard no objections to waiving that. And that's the end of our discussion. The 2 conditions that we have are bicycle rack and additional lighting. If I'm not missing something. Further comments, questions, anything the applicant wants to add? Staff?
Comment is that I don't believe we closed the public hearing, for the record.
No, I don't think so.
Not yet.
Well, let's
Move that we close the public hearing.
Carson, do we have a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? Close the public hearing. Unanimous. Another motion? Anyone?
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Mr. O'Keefe.
I move that we approve site plan review 2013-00003 for the property at 271 South Pleasant Street with the conditions previously specified.
Thank you, Mr. O'Keefe.
Second.
Ms. Anderson, further discussion? All in favor? Passes unanimously. Thank you very much to the applicants. Thank you to the board and staff and the public. All right.
Oh, my.
Well, it's 10 o'clock. We have a couple things to do before we can go home. The first is that we need to, in my opinion, withdraw the rental registration amendment that we had recommended to town meeting on the advice of town council. Says we shouldn't do it. Discussion from the board.
Oh, we had already done that.
We did not. We discussed it, but we never actually withdrew it. So either discussion or a motion would be welcome.
I move that we withdraw the rental registration amendment.
I'll second that.
Any further discussion? Ms. Kruger?
Just a procedural question. Is it still on the warrant, so we'd have to get up at town meeting and say,
Ms. Brestrup?
I asked Mr. Tucker about that tonight, and he said it's not on the warrant.
Done.
All right. All in favor of the motion? Passes unanimously. Thank you. We have to pick movers and speakers. Not sure we're ready to do that yet. We haven't got through everything, but we could do some of them. We have rental registration requirement is gone. Public water supply protection. We need a mover and who's a member of town meeting and a speaker who can either be or not a member. Does anyone want to move and or speak? I'd be happy to speak to it, but I can't move it.
I can move it.
Acceptable to everyone?
It's just, I move in terms of the article, right?
That's all there is to it. Converted dwelling. Anyone want to, oh, by the way, can you just raise your hand, please, if you're a town meeting member?
In Rosnoy too, right?
I'll be away.
In Rosnoy?
And Rosnoy? I don't
He's
know.
not.
I don't think
Not
he
sure.
is.
He's not a town meeting member.
Oh, he's not?
No.
That must be recent.
Who wants to move this? Mr. Schreiber or Mr. O'Keefe?
I'd be happy to move it.
O'Keefe and someone possibly from the ZSC wants to speak to this? I don't know who else. Mr. Crowner, thank you. Single-family dwellings. Mover.
All of our movers didn't support it.
What?
I said all of our movers did not support the
I
article, which is
know.
sort of a strange
How does that
situation.
work?
I'd be happy to move it. It doesn't matter.
Thank you, Mr. O'Keefe, for taking one for the team. And a speaker, someone who supported it. Mr. Crowner. Two-family dwellings.
I can move.
Excellent.
Speak to it if you want to spread the wealth.
Who's speaking?
Mr. Schreiber is up.
Schreiber. Both, okay.
Lodging or boarding house. what was our outcome on that?
It was just a definition. I think we
Definition?
decided to support it unanimously. Maybe it wasn't unanimous. I can't remember.
I guess I'd be happy to speak to it if you want. I'm hearing no objection. Does someone want to move it?
Who are the town meeting members again?
You or Mr. O'Keefe?
Okay, I can. let's
Oh,
see.
you're away, that's right.
I'm away.
Lodging or boarding house?
I can move it,
Okay, thank you.
and then I'll be good at that.
And residential zoning definitions, this was the 50/50.
No, that was
It
only
was single
50/50
family
was
was the
the,
50.
Oh, that's,
single family.
sorry, that's single family. I'm sorry, it's been a long night.
Oh, this is another, geez, we're cooking with gas.
Well, thank you. Okay, so someone want to move and speak the residential zoning definitions?
I will move it.
The mover could speak to it.
Sure, I'd be happy to speak to it.
Thank you, Mr. O'Keefe. That's excellent participation. Thanks, everyone.
You get a reprieve in the spring.
The next three don't
I'm
apply to
already
us,
on
so that takes care of our. We do?
We need to just present the board's position.
Who wants to do that?
Stating it, right?
No, you're actually given the board's position on it. Replacement of, I can speak to the replacement of existing structures containing dwelling units.
Thank you, Mr. Schreiber. We haven't heard the other two, so I don't know how we can choose a speaker.
I'll have to wear my tomato-proof suit. But if I speak to it, I don't guess I have to speak in favor of it. I could just give the planning board's position on it.
Correct.
Yeah. Just-
And two-family dwelling and converted dwelling, presumably everybody's had a chance to read these, even though we don't have an official position on them. Is there anybody who feels strongly that they want to speak to these? Mr. Rosnoy?
Yeah.
Just probably speaks up if you.
These are gonna be amendments to what we've already reviewed, is that right? That we just haven't seen yet, that they're coming?
These are their own, they really have no connection to what.
They're just completely, so how can we?
Well, the two-family one we talked about too.
Ms. Brestrup?
If you're not comfortable deciding who's going to speak to it now, I already told the people in the town manager's office that we might not have speakers for these yet, because we haven't had the public hearings yet, so.
So fair enough, we don't have to decide.
Yeah, town meeting is a month away, so.
Okay. Moving right along. Thank you, everyone. Really, very helpful. We have a 61 removal from, actually, the next thing on the agenda is actually the signing of decision for the town parking lot out back. And I don't know if everyone's had a chance to review this or not, but the conditions are really nothing like what we asked for. Ms. Brestrup, do you want to say to the board what you told me?
Yes. This was a little bit of an unfortunate series of events. We had a new building commissioner, and in some ways, DPW has been doing projects around town without necessarily always coming before the board when they might have, to put it diplomatically. So the new building commissioner is enforcing the bylaw a little bit more strictly in terms of town projects than the old building commissioner had, possibly. And so the work was begun, and then the building commissioner realized that it had begun, and he said, stop, go to the planning board. Meanwhile, the DPW understood that the project was coming to you only for review of placement of the generator and striping of the parking lot. Somehow they didn't get that the lighting was also part of the plan. Now, the building commissioner intended it to be part of the plan, but DPW didn't really understand that, so that's why the lights went in. This is what I'm understanding from talking to the DPW superintendent. So, Jonathan Tucker and I had a meeting with the DPW superintendent and understood his position, so we, what should I say, modified the conditions to reflect that discussion. In other words, the requirement for a lumen plan, since the lights are already in and you can go out and observe where the lighting falls, we felt that it might not be necessary to actually do a lumen plan. If the DPW put the lights on the plan, on a site plan, and you could go out and observe whether the lights were actually bright enough, you could say, well, for those lights, you need a brighter light to shine farther out into the parking lot, or something like that. In other words, you could make an on-site assessment rather than needing the plan itself. I forget what some of the other conditions were. Let me just look at them for a minute.
We talked about lighting next to the parking meter, where the people get their parking tickets.
I believe you all have a copy of the decision in front of you?
I have two if someone needs one.
No, it's at the bottom. That's what this is. Yeah, it's this one. I do have it.
I'll just say for my part that I did have a chance to review these conditions, and they're not really conditions. They're shoulds and mights and recommends, and I'm not really, I'll go along with whatever the board decides, but I'm not prepared to sign this as written. I don't think it meets the conditions that we set, and conditions aren't usually optional. So the other piece of it is, I don't know if anybody walked through the parking lot tonight on their way in, but the parking machine is not lit, and if anything, the parking lot is darker than it was before. So I don't see the lighting as being adequate, at least, so.
Sorry, I don't seem to have any more copies of this. I thought I had given them all. Do you have the copies? So would you like to run through these conditions and tell me how you would like to word them, and I can go back and reword them so that I'll bring it back on November 7th with the appropriate wording? Or are you not ready to do that at this point? In order to have it signed by November 7th, I would need to have your comments.
Ms. Kruger?
I agree with you, and I'm really disturbed by the process. I just think it's, with all due respect, it's inappropriate for the staff to negotiate a new set of conditions with another town department. That you're in a compromised position in trying to deal with another department. So I think it's awkward at best. And it wasn't dark when I came to the zoning subcommittee, but I looked at the two far light posts, and I was appalled at how ugly they were and inappropriate. And there's no other applicant with a building of this scale and scope in the very downtown that we would let have just a pass on a really important. Some of the site features may not be that important, but the lighting, I feel like, is really blown, and I wouldn't sign the decision either. And I don't know how we're going to deal with it at this late date. It has financial implications, but I'm very distressed. And not that you sat down and had the meeting, but I just don't think that's the way we can work this out.
Ms. Ford?
Well, I'll speak to number 5, because the design review board, that was the one thing we did say, is that the generator should be painted to match the brick enclosure, and here it's just saying if feasible.
Should.
Yeah.
You know, there's the whole.
Shall.
Yeah, I mean, okay, if you want some changes, Chris, this would be the changes I would propose. Every should in these conditions changes to shall.
And no if feasible, just the generator shall be painted.
Let's see, in item 2, I would change the language a bit. Currently, if you just read through it to the, it'll read, since all lighting exists or light pole bases have been installed, following completion of the current work, The board will schedule an evening site visit to assess the effectiveness of the lighting, and then my changes, and may require the applicant to submit a lighting plan or make, and then it goes to changes in luminaires, wattage, and coverage as may be needed. Does that work for you?
No, because I think that doesn't allow us to have them redo those, the two back poles. And it limits the authority, because we didn't get to see it, and now it's up, and it's saying we can change the bulbs if you don't like it.
Oh, that's what luminaires, okay.
Yeah, and I'm willing to have a long amount of time for them to catch up, because both the light pattern in the dark and walking around, what do you?
Yeah, the way that they're installed is that the concrete footing is, you know, there's a black, I can't think of the right term, there's a black base that's supposed to sit flush to the ground, but it's up on a pole. It's like waiting for the flood.
It's a cement post and then this black period piece light with a modern head on it.
Yeah.
Looks like.
Ms. Brestrup?
So the complications, I know that you don't really want to hear this, but I will tell you what they are. This whole project started with the previous town manager who essentially told DPW, go out there and fix the parking lot. I don't care what you do, just fix it. So that was the mindset that they went into this with. They didn't have a big budget. Any changes that are made will have to be, the money will have to be found somewhere in the future. So changes can be made, but those changes, line items for those changes will have to be incorporated into the budget for some time in the future. Which is, you know, I'm not saying that you shouldn't do what you think is right. I'm just kind of explaining a little bit about how this came about. You might consider asking them to paint those light pole bases black.
Again, that's,
I don't think they're gonna take them out, in other words.
The lighting, in my opinion, back there, first of all, the one thing that we were talking about, the parking machine is still completely in the dark. It's completely dark. And the two existing lights at the back barely light the parking lot. That's how dim they are. And they're ugly. I don't know what we can do. I mean, I feel like we're sort of being steamrolled here. If we don't sign it by November 7th, it's allowed. And, you know, it's, yes.
It's got to be functional and safe. That's our job to, you know, speak to it being functional and safe.
Beautiful.
Mr. O'Keefe?
So I guess what we need to do then is come up with what our conditions are. So I mean, we need to sign it, and so we need to sign something that has conditions that we agree with, so.
So are you, may I ask some questions?
Yes.
Are you okay with the first condition?
Except that it has the word should in it.
Okay.
Which should change to shall.
Provide a low barrier approximately 3 feet high along the edge. Location of this barrier shall be shown on the final revised site plan. If the barrier is to be a fence, photographs shall be submitted and approval. If the barrier is in the form of plantings, information to be installed shall be shown on the final site plan. Okay, the second one, the final revised site plan shall show the locations of the 2 new pole-mounted lights and existing light fixtures mounted on the building. What about the second sentence? Since all such lighting exists or the light pole bases have been installed following completion of the current work, the board will decide to schedule an evening site visit to assess the effectiveness of the lighting and make any recommendations. What did you say before?
Well, I think the real, what we're trying to get at here is that the lights were changed without site plan approval. And that, as such, we reserve the right to set conditions as to the lighting.
Right, so I would.
Ms. Ford.
I would recommend that we actually just eliminate, beginning with the word since, and rewrite that section.
what I was thinking.
Strike that, and then what's, substitute what?
The applicant shall submit a lighting plan subject to approval by the planning board.
Well, no, we specifically want to see,
Oh, yeah.
oh, we got the parking machines below that, okay.
But we want to see the appearance of the lighting, the adequacy of the lighting.
Adequacy of the.
And we'll sign the decision, but it's going to have to come back. It's a conditional approval.
So how are you going to judge the adequacy of the lighting?
Discretion.
Are you going to make a site visit to judge it?
Yes.
We'll walk out tonight. Why not? It's dark.
All right, when we close the meeting, we'll have an informal site visit.
Can we
have to notice?
email our decision to, our observation
I'd prefer it if you
to you?
told me tonight.
You want to get this
I'll
done.
go out,
Get
I'll
her
go
done.
out with you.
Number 3,
I have a recommendation for rewording number 3.
please.
I would strike the words "the board recommends."
Yep.
I would just say, lighting should be installed. Shall be installed, at the parking machine. I think central is not needed, so that it's visible, so it's readable at night. And I'd strike the second sentence, because I think that's as well.
Yeah.
Me too.
Not in our purview.
It's distracting.
Yep.
So
Um,
there.
I think 4 stands as is, except for changing the shoulds to shalls. And I don't know about the word consider.
Similar solution for displaying numbers for spaces 1 through 11 should be implemented? Should be.
Take out the word consider, is that what you're saying?
And what about the site plan possibly being put at the machine? That was something that Connie thought might work. And leave it, on number 5, leave out the word if feasible. The generator should be painted, shall be painted to match the noise dampening enclosure, brick red, and the building. Now, what
6.
about installing a planted screen? Are you going to say yes, definitely install?
What was our decision on that? Were we
I think
gonna?
that's what you did say, yes.
Well, no, this is in front of the generator.
Oh, right, I'm sorry, yeah, my bad.
If changed, this would read, "A planted screen shall be installed between the generator and the street."
Planted screen.
So, if I may.
Mr. O'Keefe?
I don't recollect the details of our deliberations in detail, but I just wanted to point out that it's not unheard of for us to have conditions that contain shoulds and considers.
Yeah.
And so I don't know for sure that we said you
I
need
think,
to
yeah.
plant a
I
screen.
don't think we
Right.
said 100% they had to.
absolutely.
Okay, so 6
could
can
say
stay
should.
as is?
Coulda, coulda,
Shoulda, coulda, woulda?
yeah.
6 stays the way it is? Okay.
Don't install planted screen.
Might as well cross it out, but that's okay.
Chris, I hope you're not taking this too personally. We're just,
Oh, not at all, no. I actually didn't write these.
who could it have been?
Okay.
And then the last ones are fine.
Well, wait a minute. The
Right?
exterior
No?
lighting shall be dark sky compliant. I mean, the stuff that's out there right now isn't.
Until we see the plan.
Well, but if we go out there, I mean, I can look out the window, I can tell you right now, it's not dark sky.
No, I know.
Well, getting them to comply with all these conditions is going to be a whole other can of worms. First, we have to say what they have to comply with.
Okay,
They'll be
all
out of
right,
compliance.
okay.
That'll be,
Okay.
oh, yes, Ms. Anderson.
I would also, just for consistency's sake or readability, Chris, if you could group anything related to lighting, sort of like when we go from lighting up on 4 and 3 and 7, just sort of put the lighting ones, you know, in order, put them all together.
And while you're at it, you can do the barriers.
Barrier, yeah, in other words, group them.
Yeah.
The barrier, the landscaping, and then the lighting and,
Other than that, we love it.
other than that, we love it. We're not signing it.
All right, we're done with this. Okay, we have a 61 removal request. This is a notice of intent to sell under Mass General Laws, Chapter 61, Section 8. This is another W.D. Cowles pulling out land on Flat Hills Road, Lot 4. We've received all the information on this. Does anybody want to comment? Mr. Crowner?
I will make my same argument. I think everyone knows it, but I will make a motion when it's appropriate. It's I've changed the wording from my previous to try and incorporate some of the concerns that people had. So,
Mr. Connor's proposal was reflected in the minutes of the last meeting. Any other comments on this? Does anyone want to sort of, I mean, I don't have any, I can't, let me see. I don't support the town spending money to buy this lot.
Right.
So that would be my position on this.
I'll make that into a, are we ready for motions, or?
I think Mr. Crowner has dibs.
I move that the planning board convey to the select board a finding that the lot proposed for removal from the Chapter 61 program meets the minimum qualifications for preservation in that it is not in an existing village center, there is no public transportation or pedestrian infrastructure connecting it to a center, and its use for other than residential development has been incentivized by the state. The planning board's preference is to encourage residential growth in accordance with master plan goals through center rezoning and transfer of development rights, and it acknowledges that other factors beyond its purview will influence the decision on exercising the town's right of first refusal.
Thank you, Mr. Crowner.
Thank you.
That's the motion.
Is
So
there a
are
second?
we?
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Motion's been moved and seconded. Further discussion. Ms. Brestrup?
Are you going to, so this is not actually a recommendation for or against the select board exercising its right of first refusal?
Do we know if the select board has already exercised its right of first?
No, they haven't. They're waiting to hear from you.
Any further discussion?
Say, well, I respect the mover's position on this. I can't support that motion because I feel differently about Chapter 61 land and development outside of village centers. So I think you're taking a principled position and expressing that through your motion. It's not going to change the outcome, but I just don't support it.
I agree exactly with Ms. Kruger. I do absolutely respect your position and thank you for bringing it, but I also can't support it. Ms. Anderson?
I was just reading through the purchase and sales agreement, and it's clearly going to be a buildable lot, perk test, and with the conditions of the sale. So it's very clear from whoever the buyer is. Doesn't really matter, but that assurance from the town of Amherst that Lot 4 is indeed a buildable lot, perk test, which you usually do only for building, and then the rest of it is, standard for lots.
Thank you, Ms. Anderson. I'll also say that we have an email from Cinda Jones, and it basically says that W.D. Cowles has sold lots and that they've used the proceeds via tax-free exchanges to buy over 400 acres of timberland in Pelham. So please let the board know that while they're enabling local economic development, a good thing in itself, they're also enabling landscape level regional conservation. Okay, any further discussion? All in favor of Mr. Crowner's motion? All opposed? Any abstentions? Thank you, Mr. Crowner. Your motion fails. Another motion, please.
Do you want to know what the wording of this should be? Perhaps Mr. O'Keefe knows, but it would be something to the effect of that you do not recommend that the town exercise its right of first refusal on this property.
What she said, I'll move that.
Thank you, Mr. Schreiber. Do we have
I'll second that.
seconded? Further discussion? All in favor? All opposed? And no abstentions. Thank you, everyone. All right, finally, election of officers. This
We
is
need to do, just looking at planning board schedule.
planning board schedule. This has all been submitted, it's in your paperwork.
All right.
Unless we want to alter that somehow. It certainly is an agenda item. We have, yes, Mr. Crowner.
The zoning subcommittee tentatively scheduled the meeting for next Wednesday in case we have more work to do. So I guess I'd like to resolve that, whether we're actually going to meet or not.
I won't
That would
be
be up to you.
Okay, you won't be there. So I guess it was because we weren't sure how many articles we were going to get through tonight. It seems to me we probably don't need a meeting, but we could for one. Okay, so the zoning subcommittee is not going to meet next week. And I will.
Our next meeting of the planning board is
November 7th?
November 7th.
After the election. No,
Yeah,
maybe
at which time we will,
after the election, right?
we will have some numbers, or we'll be waiting on a decision from the Supreme Court.
Or be on the train to Canada.
We have two public hearings on the petition articles. Anything else on the agenda for that night, Ms. Brestrup?
There is a site plan review for 42 Shumway Street. Your former applicant, Yu Pen Sang, is coming with a proposal to turn 42 Shumway Street into a two-family house. I've spoken to the building commissioner about this, and in light of the zoning amendment that's going to go to the town meeting, I asked him whether the applicant should continue with this application and whether you can act on it, and he said yes. However, if the zoning amendment passes, the applicant will need to go and get a special permit. So you can just go through your process as you normally would.
Can I just make, so I went to this workshop, citizen planning training workshop this week, and they said that basically the first hearing, so he had his application in before the first hearing, the public hearing, or, yeah.
He, in terms of the timing, he is subject to the proposed change. There's no doubt about that, but there is a doubt about whether the proposed change will actually pass or not. If the proposed change doesn't pass, then the existing bylaw exists just like it is right now. So that's what he's going on. He's going on a sort of a bet that this is going to stay the way it is. But if it doesn't, then he's going to have to go to the Zoning Board of Appeals.
Where's
So
Shumway?
you-
I can't think of where Shumway is.
Shumway
It's
Street?
down by Cheryl Nina's salon down there and the Amherst Tire place.
Got it.
Yep.
Got it.
So in addition to that, you also have warrant review and planning board reports that you'll need to look at. And then your old pal Chris Curtis from the PVPC would like to come and speak to you about transfer of development rights. And we've asked David Elvin to come and speak to you from PVPC about transit-oriented development. So, and in addition to that, Patrick Kamens wants to come and talk to you about minor changes to the site plan at 321 Main Street.
I would suggest that we ask respectfully that the folks who want to come and talk to us wait until subsequent meetings.
The PVPC people? Wait until December?
And then, is there any reason Mr. Kamens can't submit something in writing?
And not have him come before you?
Well, if it's something that needs to be done right away, it's just, I would like to have it in writing beforehand so that we can get to it, through it quickly. So everyone has a chance to see it. We're not seeing it for the first time at the meeting.
Okay. All right.
Mr. Schreiber?
Can we go back to, so the 42 Shumway, this is a ZBA issue, right?
Right now, it's a planning board issue because
Planning
it's a
board issue.
two-family
I see,
house
I
in the
see.
RG zoning district.
Got it, I'm sorry, SPR, got it.
But it's not going to be owner-occupied, so if the zoning amendment passes for two-family houses, then he'll be required to get a special permit from the Zoning Board of Appeals. Because it's the first notification published in the paper, the first legal ad that's published in the paper for the public hearing that defines, and you have to have your permit in hand and filed with the town clerk by the time of the first publication, so.
So we don't need to decide anything on that right now, correct, Ms. Ford?
I will just mention that this project did come before the Design Review Board, so we've had a look at it already.
42 Shumway.
Further discussion? Okay.
Are we still on schedule? Because there's a second schedule sheet in our packet that,
Well, the schedule sheet I'm looking at, unfortunately, there's no date on it, but it starts Monday, October 22nd, Select Board Review, and it ends with precinct meetings, question mark.
I was wondering for the town meeting coordinating committee, do you have a plan?
I don't think we do, but. Is that,
the question?
do we have a plan for the town meeting coordinating committee?
Who's
What
gonna
sort of
go,
plan?
and they want us to present this.
Oh, for the warrant review.
Yeah. So that's on this,
Warrant review is November 8th. Well, I would propose that whoever's speaking to these articles be prepared to speak to that. And we'll make a final decision on it on the 7th.
So we would have to have basically many of us there?
Well, you have another proposal? I'm just shooting from the hip here.
In the past, I've done that.
Oh.
Not that I'm volunteering to do it again. I'm just pointing out that I've gone.
Nominations be closed.
Yep, nominations are closed.
Yep.
I've gone to that meeting and presented all of the articles rather than having the
So I can
speakers
do
to each
that.
article.
So I can do that. I misunderstood what this discussion was about, so that's why I didn't.
I move
Okay,
nominations
you're
be
willing to
closed.
do that, Mr. Croner? Thank you. Kudos. Okay, anything else scheduling wise?
So what I thought we were talking about was precinct meetings. I don't want to go to all the precinct meetings.
Oh,
there's precinct meetings, and then I had a question about whether the planning board wanted to do any outreach on zoning, in addition or instead of the precinct meetings, to go out and talk to people in a kind of information forum. 'Cause it seemed like in times past, people were not having, and I mean, yes, a lot of people come to our meetings, but there's a lot of people who don't know what's going on and may not come to the town meeting coordinating. It may be too much on our plate to take that on, but either going to some of the precinct meetings or planning maybe one or two information sessions that we hold if we think outreach is important.
I think it's a great idea, Connie, but I think the realistic time commitment with the precinct meetings, because they cover everything. And it's a busy time of the year.
as I had said, I'll be away for town meeting, but I'll be here till right before town meeting starts. Right? So I would be happy to help with some of the precinct meetings, or even to go to the town meeting coordinating committee to give you some support. So I'd like to participate, but it'll all be beforehand.
Your help is more than welcome, Ms. Kruger.
Yes.
Thank you. Anything anyone wants to do as far as educating the public or town meeting members about our zoning amendments, I think is a great idea. It's okay with me.
Sit on your hands.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Mr. O'Keefe.
I apologize. There's one more scheduling item I wanted to mention to people, which is that this fall town meeting is actually a departure schedule-wise from our normal timetable. Town meeting has always historically started at 7:30 p.m. The select board at their most recent meeting this week has decided to start this fall's town meeting at 7 p.m. rather than 7:30 p.m. With the idea being to hopefully increase our efficiency and get things done a little bit quicker and maybe save a night of town meeting. We start at 7:30, but people trickle in and there's procedural stuff, and we often don't start working until 8, and we really only have 2 hours of work then. So the idea is to try to get a little bit more done and maybe save nights of town meeting. So that applies to us, obviously, from the perspective of needing to be there from zoning articles, starting a little bit earlier than we're used to.
Was there any consideration of going to a one-night town meeting like every other town?
That's a frequent topic of discussion. And not that the select board seriously considered that, but I've certainly talked to people about it.
Remember,
yeah.
only the H is
We have to go
silent.
to Nome, Alaska, where it's night all the time.
A lot of towns do have weekend town meetings where they come in on Saturday morning. I mean, a lot of small towns do their town meeting in one evening. That's possible. I don't think that's realistic here. But a lot of towns do show up on Saturday morning and kind of lock the doors and don't let anybody out until all the business is completed. And people have proposed that here, but that's certainly not on the table for anything
So
in
7
the near
p.m.
future.
That's a change.
Yes.
Thank you.
There's another important scheduling event, which is Thursday, October 27th, Trivia Bee.
Oh, the trivia bee.
Oh, my gosh.
Come support the defending champions.
Thursday,
Or
October
Thursday
27th?
is not
It's the
next
25th.
next Thursday.
whatever. Don't, October.
There is a
defending-
team, the planning board team will defend its champion, or
Oh,
attempt to
see,
defend its
I
championship.
was not aware
so.
of that from last
Well,
year.
best of luck.
Out of my radar.
Thank you, and everyone is welcome to attend. It's a great,
Who of this group is on the team?
So we're the four unrelated adults is our
The
team.
400, are you kidding? I have a scheduling announcement, because I think we're going to run out of steam for committee reports, as we have been. So November 1st in the evening at the Housing and Sheltering Committee is holding an open public information session with the consultant Karen Sonnenberg, and there's another consultant working with her who's an architect, to do a run-through of the housing production plan. And since the board had been interested in that, and I'm the liaison, I wanted to let you know. I think Ms. Brestrup sent out an email or forwarded an email from Nate Malloy. So you have that, but I just wanted to mention it. And it's going to be at the Amherst Housing Authority 5th floor community room, because there weren't any town rooms available for that night. Do
It's
we
at 33 Kellogg Ave
33 Kellogg.
and Whalen Apartments.
And it's at 7 p.m.
Thank you, Ms. Kruger. Topics not reasonably anticipated.
No topics.
I would entertain a motion with respect to the election of officers and planning reorganization that the existing officers and appointees be reappointed for the coming year.
Muscle move?
Second. Comments?
Yes?
Okay. You see my name 3 times down there? And I would like to respectfully ask to be removed from the Transportation Plan Task Force. Not that it meets, because it's sort of a ghost committee, But I think Mr. Rosnoy is perfectly capable of being our representative to that if and when it ever meets again. The Safe and Healthy Neighborhoods, as we heard at the meeting with the town manager, is now, it's a different committee. So I'm not necessarily that appointee, because what I was on before was just sort of, I don't know. I'm not removing myself, but I'm just saying technically, he's defined a whole new group. And it was just a planning board rep, you know, the landlord, the tenant, the real estate agent, the fire department, you know, you were there. And so,
Yes.
that might need to be clarified, rather than just,
I could ask Ms. Anderson, would you be interested in being?
I still would be interested if it's the planning board's wish. Yep.
And I would point out that anybody could raise their hand and ask to be appointed as well. Mr. Crowner?
I would take Sandy's place on the Transportation Task Force if people don't mind.
Any other changes? Mr. O'Keefe, I know this, we're slightly out of order, but.
Yeah, no, not a change, but just a comment in support of the slate of officers. I'd just like to commend the chair for the exceptional job you've done in running the meeting this evening.
Thank you.
Even though it's close to 11 p.m., we got through 7 public hearings tonight. That has to be a record in my almost 6 years on the board.
Shattering the land speed record.
Thank you.
Yes,
And
and
thanks.
they were conducted efficiently and respectfully, and thank you very much.
Here, here.
Thanks, Mr. O'Keefe. I really appreciate the feedback, and thanks to all of you, because it's really a team effort, so. There is a motion on the table, and it has been seconded. Is there any further discussion? We do have a slight change, which is that Crowner is replacing Anderson on the Transportation Plan Task Force. Hearing no further discussion, all in favor? That passes unanimously. Any Z?
We all have to recuse ourselves, right? Can't vote for yourself.
Yes, Mr. Carson, you're the only one eligible to vote.
I think he's our clerk.
Oh, that's true, you're the clerk. You're not on the subcommittees, I didn't see your name.
Right.
Yes.
Oh, he's on zoning subcommittee.
Zoning subcommittee.
Quite often.
Yeah.
Yep. Are there any, we don't have any A&Rs tonight, do we?
No A&Rs.
Okay.
That's so the right answer.
And we are not going to hear any other things tonight unless there's something of critical importance from staff. Yes?
I've been asked to tell you about 179 Northampton Road, which is an old derelict home that has been standing, I believe it's been condemned. I'm not absolutely sure about that. Anyway, there's a proposal before the ZBA before the Historical Commission to demolish the building, and before the ZBA to build a new 2-family house on that property. It's in the RN zoning district, so I'm presenting it to you in case you're interested in reviewing it. It's going to be before the ZBA on November 15th. So you would have to add that to your slate of items on November 7th, which also already seems pretty heavy, but since you're discussing 2-family houses, we wanted to make sure that you knew about this.
When will the ZBA be hearing it?
November 15th.
But that could be potentially affected by this petition article, right? In other words, that they can't build anything bigger than what's there now.
Oh, yes, definitely.
Is that an RG?
RN.
RN.
Or RN?
Well,
Except the petition article is townwide.
Yes.
Maybe
Oh,
that's-
yeah, no, that's a separate
just
question.
different question.
Where in Northampton Road?
Oh, it's one
It's
of the,
across from the Amherst College Fields. It's an old brown house that's been deteriorating for years.
Oh, that
What's
one.
on the
It's
windows?
red Oh, yeah, sure. It's a big, huge, it's a big house, okay.
Who is building the 2-family? Is this affordable
Uh,
housing?
Wilson Construction?
I'd like to see it.
You would,
we have people down this end asking to see it. Is anybody?
Yes, we want to see it.
Oh, who's kicking me? Ooh.
Sure.
I'm opposed to hearing it. I think we have enough on our slate, and anybody who wants to go can go to the ZBA meeting. That's what I think. Why waste time?
Allow us to make a recommendation as the board.
Yeah.
And that's why we get to look at these if we should so desire, because then as a board, we don't command the ZBA to do it, but we as a board can make a recommendation.
Let's take a straw poll. Who wants to hear this? 4, 5. So that, okay, so we'll hear it.
May I just say one more thing? This will be my last. I think Chris Curtis was actually slated to come before the zoning subcommittee on the 7th and not before the planning board. So, and David Elvin is slated to come before the planning board. So shall I still tell Mr. Elvin to postpone his appearance until December?
I really think it would be best.
Okay, all right.
We're not going to be able to give him the attention he deserves.
3 minutes, please. Is David the one that lives right up here, like Hadley? Is that?
Yeah, he does live in Hadley. All right, anything else? Going once, going twice, we're adjourned.
Oh,
Thank
may I
you.
say one more thing outside of the meeting? I don't care about going out to the parking lot with you tonight. You can go out and email me your comments.
Okay.
And I will.
She's done. She's done with us.
Done. I have to clean up.
You guys can all go down.
Put all this paperwork away.